Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys. Should be a good show today. Jump on the tablet. Hey, Diane. Good to see ya.
Is crap. Stop wasting your time watching bot boosted
Yeah, Diane, I was pretty tired. I needed a day off. I didn't feel the best, so thanks for asking.
shills and self-appointed
Come on, help
gurus
me out.
cloying for your attention. Instead, join the Gosslings interview live stream and podcast. The Gosslings, a dark-lit digital speakeasy of free thinkers. A super chat of radical truth-seeking wizards who eat trolls for second breakfast. Topics that'll make your mama's hair stand on end. Ideas that'll make your pastor's knees knock. Guests that will illuminate the hidden chambers of your mind. And interviews that strike down the darkness. Welcome to the Gosslings.
Greetings, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
I'm Jonathan,
I am Nick.
and we are the Gosslings.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun one. One that we have been looking forward to for probably at least, like, ever since the day that we got it figured out that we could do this. We were like pretty stoked about it. So it's been like at least probably like a month.
Hey,
or two.
Tricky, good to see you, mate.
Just over a month, yeah.
So yeah, if you were ever interested in the occult or witchcraft or anything that is on the dark side of the supernatural and how someone can come out of that, this is going to be an awesome interview for you. But before we do that, we got to get through our front of house work.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that real quick. Number one, of course. Actually, before we do all our front of house stuff, we got to do our test.
Well, let's do the test.
Let's do the test.
Right.
Let me turn the ticker on.
We were gonna go old school at Nick's suggestion for this, by the way, today. That's what threw me. We
were gonna do swords and bucklers or battle axes, and they were like, let's just do rock paper.
Yeah, let's do rock paper scissors. Yeah.
Let's see who goes first.
Yeah. All right.
Ready to go.
1, 2, 3, 2. Yeah.
So I do it.
Dealer. Well, whoever wins gets the dealer's choice.
Man, we haven't done that in a long time.
So yes, Nick is it.
All right, everyone. Grab your drinking vessels. Take up the broken sword of your father
and strike down the darkness.
Cheers.
Cheers. I say, Nick, what are we drinking from today? Same thing we drink from every day.
Yes, we are drinking from the Kothon Spartan mug by Jericho Pottery, jerichopottery.com. Every mug is handcrafted. He's an unofficial sponsor of the show. This is a replica of what the Spartans traveled and drank out of.
Yeah.
Designed by Joel at Jericho Pottery along with Stephen Pressfield.
Yep. Author of Gates of Fire.
Yep. And we got to get you one because they are amazing.
Yeah. They are excellent. And then
it's the only thing I've never put in the dishwasher.
I knew they'd be lesbian jokes. I sort of knew that with you, Tricky.
Really?
I can't bring myself to do it.
I can't taste the difference.
Yeah. You can't. Tastes like Tide Pods.
State.
Short for lesbian, leso. Australians always shorten words. We call them lesos.
Spartan Strong with the Kothon mug from Jericho Pottery. And then our second sponsor is none other than Giordani Jovanovic Hair Care Products.
Yes, indeed. Mike Fisher sponsored the show, Giordani Jovanovic. Amazing products. Jonathan's been using them. You can tell by how beautiful his beard is.
Look at how Leonidian my beard is. Oh, man. I mean, like, I'm a dead ringer. When I hold this in my hands, you can't tell I'm not Gerard Butler.
That's true.
Except I don't quite have, like, the Scottish side mouth thing going that Gerard Butler has. You know, every time you talk, just like over here. That's still my Nick Nolte impression. I'll work on that.
You work on that.
Yeah. It's like if you combine Nick Nolte and Sean Connery.
Well, and regarding the product, just like I said last week, if you want the beard squatch,
Yes.
or the lion's mane,
Yes.
you can stop breaking the 10th commandment and get yourself some Jordani Jovanovic.
That's right.
All right.
Be real. What is their tagline is great. It's real products for real men. But I also say be as sexy as you are deadly.
That's right.
JordaniJovanovic.com.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
JordaniJovanovic.com. Yeah, because it's John Wick's real name. So give 007 a run for his money. Be the Keanu Reeves of your county.
Yeah, trademark pending.
Yeah, trademark pending.
2022. And finally, if you have not yet, please take up the broken sword of your finger and strike down the subscribe button and smack the bell. We appreciate that, as always.
Yep.
And now that the obligatories are behind us, oh my goodness, look at that chat. We've got a lot of people watching. Man,
Yeah,
Jay Reeves is on. Very cool.
Yeah.
Danny Dennis, Joey Payne. Very good.
Nice.
Hi, that's my mom. Hey, Mom,
Joey.
what's up?
Joey's going to love this one.
Oh, yeah. And
Abonarer?
Abonarer.
Is that how I pronounce it?
Abarnare.
Abonarer.
Abarnare. Okay, yeah, I think that's it. Maybe some others that I missed. I hope not. Let's bring on Shannon.
Yeah.
Shannon, we're going to bring you on right now. Shannon has an amazing story. As you guys probably know, she came from a very dark past. She had been in the occult.
Yeah.
God has rescued her, and we're going to hear about her story now that she's on this side of the cross.
Yeah, that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shannon.
Hi.
How are you?
Wow, cool.
I'm doing great.
Yeah. Nice shirt.
Oh,
Sure.
have you heard of this podcast? Driving down the darkness, one interview at a time.
Awesome.
I wonder, that's awesome. I wonder where people could get a shirt like that, probably by becoming a patron or just going to that website right there.
I owe you a book, Shannon, because I think I once upon a time said that the first person to buy one of our shirts gets a free copy.
He absolutely said that.
Realms.
He absolutely said that.
I have it on audiobook, so a physical copy would be great.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I like to read and listen at the same time.
It'll smell like beard oil.
Yeah. Okay. It will now.
You have a glorious beard.
Don't worry. I won't rub my beard on the book. I'll take the book. I don't,
Maybe you should.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of beard hairs just fall in there. Page 43.
Yeah.
Something.
Caress it.
Yeah, it's a DNA that you can use to like clone and make an army.
Yeah.
Yes.
An army of fat, lazy, hairy, sensitive artists
I know how to do that.
who eat all the hot pockets. Yeah. Yeah, we do. We really appreciate you, like, actually not just being here, but also the shirt is awesome. Like, you have no idea, like, how long we've had the shirts and how long, like, somebody actually like wears one. It's awesome.
The logo is awesome. Like, I love the coloring and the whole palette. I love it.
Cool. Thank you.
They did a good job.
Hack a typewriter.
You can hang typewriter.
That's right.
That's right.
KGB approved.
Yeah. That's right. I would just like to point out, you're speaking the truth. I never once asked any specific person, hey, you should get a shirt before you come on the live stream.
Yeah.
Shannon bought the shirt and she sent me a picture and said, can't wait to be on the live stream wearing this.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
I like made our
you're
week.
amazing. This is
Yeah.
this is cute. So thank you for that. So tell us a little bit about, first we'll start with an overview, just kind of your background and an overview of where you were and how you got to where you are now.
So I was raised Christian, and I like a pretty standard American upbringing. And then my parents got divorced, and that sort of like it set up a chain of events. And I was through high school. High school is like when I started getting into the occult and the occult, Wiccanism, and then like Satanism as well.
Tricky, I actually sent it to you on Skype.
And of course, I was like the rebellious teenager.
Yep.
And I think it was, I partied through college, was continuing with my hedonistic ways. And then right towards the end of my 20s is when I started to calm down, and I met my husband, and I had been doing some very hard drugs at that time,
Such
and
as?
he helped to get me into rehab,
Okay.
and that's really where things started to change for me. And then a couple of years into rehab is when God opened my eyes to
I wonder what drug she was addicted to.
like the insanity that I had been partaking in. And he used Ben Shapiro of all people to
Oh,
to open my eyes, and like that's like the scales falling away from the eyes moment that came from Shapiro, which
Okay.
is funny, it's ironic, but
yeah, I love Ben Shapiro.
yeah. So I got married. I had my son. I have 2 sons now, and we
Good
are
night,
living
Lars.
life.
Good to see you,
That's
bro.
awesome.
That's the
Yes.
broad overview.
Okay.
Were you born and raised in the South?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm from Georgia. My parents were Yankees. My dad was born in Japan on a base,
Okay.
but he is definitely not Japanese, obviously.
Okay.
They both moved around a lot. So sometimes I have a Southern accent, but like usually I just sound pretty standard
I
Midwestern.
detect nothing. I detect
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I actually, it shows, because I would have had you pegged for maybe somewhere like Ohio, maybe all the way out as far as like Washington State. So
Oh, yeah.
you have one of those chameleon accents.
Yeah, I'm
Not
with
really,
you,
but
lack
Diane.
of an accent.
Treat me.
Yeah, very much. So I'd be interested to know when you were, I mean, there's a lot of things that we want to cover, but I think parents that have teenagers and they worry about this sort of thing, or maybe they're not even aware of it. They don't even know they're supposed to be worried about this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, what were some of the influences as a teenager? What were some of the influences that attracted you and kind of drew you into the occult?
So the 2 biggest things were Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Mm.
So like, and the Laura K. Hamilton books. She does like the Anita Blake like vampire type books,
Mhm.
and then Interview with the Vampire, Anne Rice, and all of her books. That's like what I kind of started to get into as like a young like kid, you know, and then like through my teenage years, and I didn't know that that the occult existed. Like I didn't know it was a real thing. I thought that was all like pretend, like make believe. And then I was at Borders. There's a bookstore pre Barnes and Noble, but I was at Borders and walking around in like the young adult section, and there like in the self-help section there was like a teen witch book. And it was in the nonfiction, and I was like, what is this? And like picked it up, and like everything changed from there. So
Interesting.
I know exactly the section you're talking about. I was on the opening crew of the Borders that was in Cool Springs and
Here in Franklin.
yeah, and it was awesome working there, but I noticed that too, like in that back right hand, and our store is the back right hand corner where it bled right out of the nonfiction section into like all the tarot cards and all of the witchcraft and the new age stuff. Very strategically placed
Now,
next to the genre section too.
Well, did you so Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that was like before the Harry Potter craze.
Yeah, that's right.
Harry Potter exploded
After
into the
the
world.
craft, but before Harry Potter.
So when Harry Potter comes onto the scene, where were you at that time? And like, what are there any warnings there? What was your opinion of all that?
Tricky.
Because J.K. Rowling was pretty open about being Christian, and so like I never associated Harry. It wasn't until I was an adult where Harry Potter. Like she clearly used, like she must have researched.
I actually wrote I liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but forgot to press the blue arrow, and the comments had moved on by then.
Young and alchemy, and like she must have done some kind of research because there are a lot of parallels. But I was in like 7th grade when I picked up my first Harry Potter book.
Okay.
So like I had been, and I didn't really like to read before that, and then Harry Potter is like what got me into reading, and I enjoyed that book, and I was like, oh, reading is fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, obviously it'd be great to be like a wizard going to Hogwarts, but like that, it wasn't with like Buffy and with Charmed. It has less of like an innocent kind of like make believe feel to it. It's more of like it's darker and sexier, and you know.
Yeah, because Harry Potter primarily takes place at Hogwarts in like almost this like pocket dimension.
Yeah.
You know, that's away from the real world. Whereas, you know, Buffy, Angel, and then you know, and then the craft, where all that takes place in the real world, and it could be you or your neighbor, or you know, and it interacts with the real world. So yeah, that makes sense. There's not as much of a dividing line.
Yeah. And like I don't feel like now as like a sage person, like, and having like gone through everything that I've gone through, I have like Harry Potter books over here, but like I don't feel like convicted reading them. Like I don't feel like, oh, this is wrong. Like it doesn't, because there's nothing in it really that, aside from like the alchemical kind of parallels, aside from like the names of spells and stuff, it's not really anything like the occult or like Wicca.
Yeah.
Well, that carries some weight because you lived it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel better because my kids have read Harry Potter.
Yeah. Like I never used like a wand and like waved it and like did Expelliarmus or
Forgeticus.
So
Yeah.
But when you first got into witchcraft, you saw that book and you're like, what is this? And you started reading. Was that a journey you were going on alone at the time, or did you get connected to other people that were also into that, or how did things develop?
At first, I was by myself. My mom was like not against it, so my mom was kind of with me, and like especially through like the tarot journey. But I didn't really meet other.
Diane, they're a kids movie. Harry Potter's a kids movie. I don't watch kids movies, except The Wizard of Oz.
People who were into it also until high school, and then I obviously did find friends, and we sort of formed like a coven, but we didn't all share the same beliefs. It was more like a study group.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we did do some like.
Vash, you're talking about the brothers. That's supernatural. Oh, press the wrong button, guys. Hang on. Right.
Like spell type stuff together.
Interesting.
And you said you got into Wicca or Wiccanism first, and then moved into Satanism, which would have been probably, I guess, the more hardcore, because there is like the white magic, black magic kind of, you know, Hegelian or kind of a Hegelian dialect.
Yeah, it's like. Sorry, I don't know how to mute that. That's like the Luciferian, like Lightbringer side, and then it's like the darker, like
Satan side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they're the same thing. It's just two sides of the same coin. Like
so
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Like it comes. At the time I didn't know that it was the same thing. Is what I'm saying. Like you believe like, oh, I'm into white magic. And like I don't hurt anybody.
Yeah, happy, joy.
Anyway, and like you're
Stimpy's voice. That's actually SquarePants Bob. Is that his name? SpongeBob SquarePants. That's actually Stimpy's voice.
Just doing it for yourself, you know, and like you're trying to be like a light, a positive influence on the world, and then the other side is considered like more selfish and like you're twisting things to your will, but they are both like the same. What am I looking for? It comes from the same place. It's the
Yeah.
same,
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
power, same source.
Yeah.
It's
You
a,
said,
it's a deception.
You said the line, "Do what thou wilt."
There's some
Isn't
good
isn't
adult
that-
ones, Diane. Ren and Stimpy's pretty
It's the
funny.
whole of the law.
Isn't that in
Yeah.
like the Satanic Bible or something?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
That's kind of like their main principle.
Yeah. And like Aleister Crowley, you know, like that whole group.
So when you were going through all of that, did you become aware of Aleister Crowley at that time? Did you like read any of his writings or study any of his life at all?
A little bit. I did. I read so that came later, really. Like as an adult, I started to like get into like the history of it, and like Helena Blavatsky and her influence on, I guess like the occult and then Aleister Crowley and all of that. But that was more later. Like at the beginning, it was like Wicca, and then that transitioned into like reading the Satanic Bible and the Necronomicon and that kind of stuff. So it was a progression.
Anton LaVey, who wrote the Satanic Bible, on his deathbed said, "Oh my, what have I done? There's something dreadfully wrong." And his priestess, she turned Christian because of it. She left Satanism and turned Christian because of it.
So at first it sounds
Oh,
like it was,
powdered toast,
exciting,
man!
It was new. You were meeting new people. All this stuff.
Learning new skills.
Yeah, learning new skills. Yeah, kind of doing all these things in secret as a group. At what point did it get kind of weird and scary?
So I guess, so I had before, so when I was still into Wicca, I had done a spell where like
Okay, far away, Di.
I lit a candle and I left this candle burning in my room, and I was an idiot and I left it there and I went to school. And when I came back from school, I had burned my room down, and like the whole house was like filled with smoke, and there was smoke damage and like all of, so that happened, but the spell worked, and it went like overboard, and like I still feel some guilt to this day, because I was affecting somebody else, I was trying to affect somebody else's will, like with this.
Actually, Diane, that does look good.
And like it worked like even years later. So
still,
wow.
Was there a delayed reaction to it working, or did it work and it carried? Okay.
Yeah, there's a delayed. It didn't seem to work at first, and then it did work. And so I had a crush on this person, and I had wanted them to like me, and it turned into like an obsession kind of thing. And like even years later, like I found out that like this person was still like obsessing, and like I don't know, I feel terrible about it. But so that was like the first thing where it was like, oh, like what, it felt off, like weird, like it kind of like dark, like
it always gets. It's like it's like the genie in a bottle thing. You can have your wish, but there's always like a price. It's a Faustian bargain, and every time, But that's the allure, is that like no one really takes it seriously enough on the consequences side.
Yeah.
How soon? So after how soon did the dots connect for you between the incident with your room and then the spell taking effect, and then you connecting the dots, like, and kind of a follow up to that, when you did connect the dots, do you feel like you were exhilarated and wanted to go deeper, or did it kind of?
Yeah, it's one of the thoughts, and isn't it tricky?
Kind of
I agree. It looks interesting.
So I think it took probably like 3 to 6 months for me to realize like oh, like maybe this worked, and like that, like it's a real thing. Like I wasn't actually expecting it to really work. Like it was more like a fun kind of like, oh, people, I don't, a part of me felt like it was fake, you know, like, oh, this is like, you know, you're a teenager and like this is like people being silly or, you know, wanting to impress each other or whatever. But yeah, like 3 to 6 months it took for me to realize that it worked. And at first I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I regretted it because I didn't like the person.
The feelings pass, but the curse
Yeah.
remains.
People change
Yes.
a lot as they go through their teen years.
Yes. Yeah.
One day I'm a goth, and then
Yes.
you know, I'm a candy kid, and then you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's dumb.
It's kind of like, well, I mean, it's just kind of like a believer. How many times have we had, you know, a concern or a need, and we pray, you know, and then we forget that we prayed, and God answers the prayer.
Yep.
And we don't connect the dots. Like, how many of us actually go, oh yeah, I remember praying about that, and then you know, I should pray more. You know?
Right.
It's very, very uncommon, it seems like, to pray and have your prayer answered and realize that and remember that you actually pray for that specific thing.
Yeah.
You know.
That's right. You write them down. Keep a prayer journal.
Do you keep a prayer journal?
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Very cool.
And then I'll have like answered prayers. So I use Post-its. So I'll write down my prayers on Post-its, and then I'll like move them to the back of the journal.
Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
What re-education camps in Australia? Vast, what are you talking about? I don't know of any vast re-education camps. I don't know about any of them. Can you post a link?
Kira say just commented and say praise reports are good. That's true. That's true. When you gather with people and you're sharing how God answered your prayer. And I think if you anticipate that, like I know I'm going to be with a group of people, you're going to be taking prayer requests, sharing praise reports. You start thinking, oh, what's God done for me? Since last time we met. Oh yeah, I remember praying about this thing. Very cool. Very cool.
What would you say? So we, even though we have never dabbled in this, we believe it's real. You have experienced it. You know it's real. What would you say to somebody who is a skeptic or just thinks, oh, it's all in your head, or it's a coincidence, or it's just, you know, a law of attraction or whatever, you know?
Well, so I mean, I think like standing on this side of the cross, like law of attraction it's the same thing. It's like the same vein. Like it's the same powers, I guess, or there's some. I mean, I used to think that it was like the law of the universe or whatever. But okay, so what would I say to a skeptic?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was a skeptic too. Like before it actually started working. Like I just was attracted to it. But I mean, it doesn't really bother me when people don't believe in it. Like, 'cause I guess I've seen it, you know, and like I've seen some really spooky things where it's like there was obviously something happening there, but I don't know what I would say to a skeptic.
I definitely want to follow up on that, but before we do, Jay Reese Bradley had mentioned people with Ouija boards. And we had, I think, briefly, you know, sort of talked about that. We've mentioned Ouija boards a few times across several interviews. But I kind of wanted to ask you, in regards to things like Ouija boards, what are some things about the occult that no one ever talks about, or that you want people to know? Some things that maybe like slip past the radar, you know, or people think is innocuous, but you know, it's like, no, this is like a real thing you might want to worry about.
Well, so the thing that always that terrified me was, so you think it's cool to like interact with either like ghosts or like you're interacting with like tarot cards or whatever, but the energy, the being that's on the other side of that hates you. they hate us, hate humans. And like, it might feel good in the moment because you're like, oh, wow, this is so neat. But like that energy or the being is, they want bad for us. Like they want to harm us or to cause us, like ultimately to lead us to our destruction.
Yeah.
Like it can be fun to like lay out a tarot reading and like have it be like spookily accurate. And then, but you have to keep in mind that like that whatever is making that happen is against humanity. So
Yeah. When did you first realize that?
So after I started reading the Bible, but I knew that there were negative entities like demons and things, and then I thought that there were like positive entities like spirit guides and like like angel type beings, but so I knew that those were there, but I thought there was like a yin and a yang, where like there were good ones and bad ones, and but
Not the
it's like
Do you believe that some people, when they pass away, they linger, they don't go to hell or heaven, they kind of linger around and stay, or do you have
No, heaven or hell.
What do you think about that?
Heaven or hell.
I think that, so I've had friends where like when their grandmother died, like the scent of the grandmother, he didn't know that his grandmother was dying, and his grandmother died and he smelled her, and then his mom told him that she had died. And like, so I feel like in passing, like as like the transition's happening, maybe like and there are people where like they'll know, or like my mom woke up in the middle of the night and like her mother was standing over her, but her mother lives in Pennsylvania and we're in Georgia, and she died like a few days later. And so it's like I feel like in the transitional moment they might be able to travel, or their spirits reach out or whatever. But like in terms of like ghosts, I don't know. I've experienced some like ghosts, and like I think they're demons.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. There are no friendly ghosts.
Yeah.
There are familiar. I've heard that there are familiar spirits.
They're demons.
Meaning you think
Ghosts are demons.
You might recognize them, but it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder. That's really interesting. And we had a similar story when my wife's grandmother passed away. Our son was a year old. And that night, when she passed, our son woke up about 1 a.m. Woke up.
How old was he?
About a year old.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was almost like and it was apparently at the same moment that she had passed away, kind of like she was saying goodbye to him, on her way. That kind of truth. That's what we like to believe anyway.
Sure.
I hope that's the case. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, remind me again how you guys found out about that. Was it through the baby monitor, or?
No, we heard him crying, and then my wife and her mom had been talking about the experience, because her mom was with her grandmother when she passed, so she knew exactly what time it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so there's some corroboration there.
Yeah.
That was interesting. Yeah.
Speaking of spooky, what are some of you mentioned like some pretty scary, spooky things that you have seen. Tell us about any of those you want to.
So my house was haunted. Like when growing up, my house was haunted, and I would see like a black feather, or like feathers like in the corner, like you like see it and you turn and look and nothing's there. And we would wake up in the middle of the night, and like my dad was a firefighter, so he would be gone for like 24 hours or 48 hours, and he'd be on like back at home for 2 days and at work for 2 days. And one night, my mom and I were sleeping in the bed, and there was like a shadow like standing over us, and I thought it was my dad. And I was like, "Oh, hey, Dad," and like turned over and like went back to sleep again. And like he was at work still, or
Wow.
yeah. And I'd see like wake up in the middle of the night, and there'd be like a man like standing in the doorway, and like as a kid, you think like, oh, that's Santa Claus, or like, oh, it's the Easter Bunny.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I like remembered back, and like there was totally like a weird like a being that kind of looked like remember on old TVs where it'd have like the snow when it wouldn't be connected to anything. It would look kind of like that, where it was like
Weird.
not connecting. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So
Weird.
that was the house we grew up in. Like the faucets would turn on sometimes, and like.
Oh
But
yeah.
my mom thought it was a ghost. She always said that we were the house was built on like an Indian burial ground, which of course it wasn't. But that's what she would say.
They're all built on Indian burial grounds.
Yeah.
What was the movie that made the Pet Cemetery? Is that the one?
Yeah,
that made
Pet
it popular?
Cemetery.
Poltergeist.
And
Poltergeist is
yeah,
the one
Poltergeist.
where,
Yeah, and there was a rumor like
Pet Cemetery. Too.
that that the house that you grew up in, there was a house right down the street, and it was the one house in the neighborhood that could not keep residents. They would move in, and a year later they'd move out.
Close to where Justin Johnson lived.
Right? Yeah, close where Justin lived, and it was like the only house in this little center area of the subdivision. It was just a park.
Yeah,
just a park area, and the houses were built around it. There was one house built on the actual park, and the reason they couldn't build any other houses in the park because it was allegedly an Indian burial ground. And this house that was built on that park could not keep residents.
Yeah,
and the
neighborhood
urban,
rumor.
the urban lore,
the suburban legend.
Well, suburban legend was that it was haunted.
You're funny, Tricky. Keep going, mate.
And I don't know about that Indian burial ground stuff, but
I was trying to think of a funny joke about a gay ghost, but I really couldn't come up with anything.
It's interesting that back then I never heard about burial mounds,
right?
And what they were actually for. And we didn't see any burial mounds, but when you have a burial ground, it makes one wonder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
How do you mean?
So burial mounds, there are Indian burial mounds all over the world.
Yeah.
And the burial mounds are oftentimes, and there's plenty in North America. Most of them are like in the kind of Midwest. There's hundreds of them in just Iowa. There's some here in Tennessee. But I don't know what you'd call them. Not pre-native people. There are the Native American tribes, but there was a group of people here before them. And those are like the Mississippian, for example. They're attributed to having built these mounds. And there were these cultures that would bury their dead under these mounds. And allegedly, if you're into the Nephilim, folklore, and really I think it's more than folklore, but there were giants buried in these mounds. Super huge skeletons have been found in these burial mounds all over the country. Of course, you can't excavate them anymore, but there's record after record after record after record of
that all get gobbled up by the Smithsonian.
Yeah, when Americans began to expand out west, they'd come across these burial mounds. They would uncover these large, oversized, skeletons. It was really, really strange. And the native tribes that had lived in the areas with these mounds said, we didn't build those. Those were here before we got here.
Yeah.
So it's not these ancient cultures that had some sort of purpose for these mounds. And what's really interesting, even the one here in Tennessee, Pinson Mound, there are several mounds in this large area, and they are arranged to align with solstices and equinoxes and so forth.
Yeah.
So they had some pretty interesting depth of knowledge back then, and they used these. I think they used them ritualistically.
Yeah. And who knows? Nephilim. If there are Nephilim buried there, then disembodied spirits. There's a lot of, Gary Wayne talks about it, and Gary Gilbert does too, that like and Clarence Larkin, that the disembodied spirits are the ghosts of the Nephilim, the souls.
That is a theory.
Yeah, and then the Bible doesn't say how many Nephilim there were. So when you have these ancient burial mounds, or even just Native American mounds, not even the giant mounds like what Ken talked about, the ones in Ohio, or just they're all over the place. But even if you just have a normal Native American burial mound, why was that place chosen? So
yep.
So cool.
Yeah, it's all very mysterious. It's all very mysterious. And these burial mounds, some of them are big. I mean, the Pinson Mound is like 70 feet high. I mean, it's huge.
Oh, wow.
And that's just about an hour from us. It's not that far.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of the high places they're mentioned in the scriptures. There they had, in Israel, they have a topography with mountains, valleys, and so forth. It was easy to find high places or build high places. But in this plain, in this area, you have to build a high place.
Yeah.
You have to build a high place that's close to, where you live, where you hunt.
Yeah.
They had to construct these things. And I think there were ritual sacrifices that probably took place on these. Me personally, I think there were sacrifices that took place on these mounds.
Of course. Yeah. The blood's where the energy, the magic, the power is.
When you transitioned over from Wiccanism to Satanism, what was that digression like? Like, what did that kind of look like? Why did you transition into Satanism? And then what were some noteworthy things or rituals or whatever that you may have participated in or seen?
Great question. What some of the rituals you've seen or participated in? Great question, John.
Within Satanism that you look back on now and are like, man, this is kind of wild, if anything.
So I think music had a lot to do with me venturing down the darker path. I was very into like death metal and like black metal and all of those, like the corpse paint kind of groups.
Yeah.
And I was always kind of attracted to like darker things, like the darker side of life. And I had a huge, so the girl that I had a crush on was very into like Satanism. And so like I started going down that path.
Yeah, sure.
And rituals, really, it was like we never did anything like super theatrical, like that's like in the movies where like you pour salt on the ground and everybody's like wearing robes. It was more like sigils where you want you create a sigil and you want something to happen, like you want to get this job, or you want your comic book series to take off. So you would make a sigil and have like a ritual around that. And so that was primarily the type of like magic that I was into. And I mean, that stuff works. Like it's kind of, I don't know.
It's scary. I mean, it's scary to think about that.
Well, for anybody, and that's kind of, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it kind of was a follow-up question that I had, is for anybody who, might be watching this, because I have those people in my life, who don't see anything wrong with this, and, maybe they don't have the right perspective on it. They don't have a Christian perspective on it. So they just see it as power acquisition, and just utilizing the resources of the latent resources of the universe to take advantage and make their lives better. For anybody who might be watching who, would be interested in that sort of thing, what would you say to them to possibly dissuade them from it?
So you're bending, you're attempting to bend the world to your will, right? Yeah. And like you can't see the consequences of what you're choosing to do. and like you're interacting with forces that do not have your best interests in mind. So you might get what you want in like the short term, but the consequences of that, like you can't see it. And like I really what like so I had done a ritual to get a new car, for example.
Okay.
And we got the exact car that we had wanted, right? But in creating that sigil, I was in a car accident with my baby at that time, like my son. We were in a car accident, and this is when he was like very little, and the car that my insurance company gave me to as like a rental while we were looking for a new vehicle
Yeah, I
was
think
the
you're right,
exact
Bas.
van that like I had
Bas, I think you're completely right. It's a spiritual affliction, and it's probably a homo demon entering their subconscious.
been wanting. Like it was the same color, the same make. It was like as a
Wow.
Chrysler Town and Country, which is like it had like TVs in it and everything. Like that's what I wanted. And that exact car is the one that I didn't have any say in it. The car rental place, that's the one they gave me.
Wow.
And then we found one on sale, like the exact same vehicle, and like but the way that happened, that went about was like that we were in a car accident. Like I got injured, my son could have died. Like like you don't have the perspective to see like how things are going to play out. And like you well, if you believe in the Bible and if you believe in God, like God has your best interests in mind, and like he works things out for those who believe in him. Things work out for the best, like for and when you submit to his will, like amazing things will happen. Like not in the way that you think it's going to happen, because you're like in the middle of it and like you can't see like 10 steps ahead like God can. Like it's submitting to his will it seems counterintuitive, especially like if you're into the occult, like you are somebody who wants to inflict your will like on reality. But once you learn how to submit to God, and that's where like life is. That's where the meaning of life is. That's where like I was miserable all like that whole time. I hated myself. Like I thought I loved myself, but I was very unhappy in that way of life. And like I can tell you, like once you're on the other side, it's like you see like the chains, like you're shackled to your own will, which it's like it's a weird thing. Like you're enslaved to your own will when you don't have Christ. Like it's
such a cosmic irony, because in you making yourself your own god, you become a slave or an addict to that sort of thing. And then when you turn your life over to Christ and you become a Christian, you kind of like can let go and stop, stressing to force things to happen. It's just it's ironic.
What was your during that time? What was your attitude towards God? What was your perspective on who God was? Did you think he was real? Did you love? Did you hate him? Were you ambivalent? Like, what was your attitude towards God during those years?
I hated God. I hated Christians. Like even like the thought of going in a church stressed me out. Like I was repulsed by Christianity. It was like just absolutely repulsed. And I think now looking back, like maybe I was being oppressed, like or something spiritual was happening, but I was very much against Christianity. And I think there's some things that happened, like after my parents got divorced. Like my dad became very angry, and he really dove into Christianity in like a authoritarian type way, and I think he could see the path that I was heading down, and he's a military guy, and that's kind of like how he approached it. So
Yeah.
like I was a young kid and I wouldn't want to go to church, and I'd like lock myself in the bathroom, and he'd be like yelling and like pounding on the door like, "You're going to church."
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. When you're a hammer, everything's a nail. That's how you
Yes.
solve problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I was very resistant to it. So,
Sure.
but yeah, I did not want Christianity to be the answer.
Why
I tried
is that?
everything.
Like what was your thought process at that time? Why did you hate God and Christians so much?
I thought that it was unenlightened and small-minded and uneducated and judgmental and like so I was like a goth kid and like a metalhead, and like you would see people that are like dressed normally, but to me it was like those people think that they're so all high and mighty, like goody two shoes. Like I would go out back and smoke a cigarette and like listen to Metallica and like it
Feeling very targeted right now, actually.
that was me though. That was me. Like I totally, yeah. So like that was like my perception of like Christians. I didn't think like there are no Christians like me. Like they don't know what life's all about. If heaven is hanging out and like knitting and listening to like India, then I don't want to be part of that.
Playing a harp on a cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do sell heaven as pretty boring.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Well, I think now it's starting to change because people like us are Christians now, and like it's not, and people are reading the Bible more, and like the Bible doesn't paint heaven in that way, like that, and there's all kinds of awesome supernatural stuff in the Bible.
Oh,
and
yeah.
like that part.
Yeah, Tricky, you can't change the past. You can only learn from it, eh, mate?
That part I was not taught as a kid, so I had no idea that.
You never heard from the pulpit. You never heard from the pulpit. Yeah.
All that,
or the classroom.
Yeah.
And why is that? Why is that? And I don't mean any disrespect to any, anybody listening that's ever preached right now, but why will you not talk about the supernatural realities of Scripture? Why will they not do that? What is your opinion on that?
I blame materialism and like the Enlightenment period, like where so science, everything was explained through materialistic views, like the atom was the pinnacle of creation, essentially, and people wanted, I think pastors wanted the church to not be laughed at and judged. So, and they wanted to attract Christians and like the hooky kind of like spiritual stuff, like, that's not real because materialism can't explain it. So there's the religion of science is what I think drove it out.
Yeah, I agree. I think pastors and preachers don't want to be laughed at.
Yeah.
They don't want to be ridiculed. And I'm pretty sure the red letters say, "What are you?" and people ridicule you and revile you for my name's sake.
Yeah.
Amen.
Pretty sure that's what the man himself said.
Mm-hmm.
The God man himself said.
So, and Jerry's made a very funny comment that says, and now you totally knit.
Yeah, you knit now? That's cool.
Yeah. I crochet.
Crochet.
So
There you go.
I do a Wednesday night women's group on Isaiah, and I teach them how to crochet.
That is so, that's cool.
Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yes, he does. Like I've told them before, like the only way I'm sitting here with you is like God's glory, like grace, by the grace of God. Like I was like, God is real. Like me sitting here in this room with you crocheting is proof that God is real.
Yeah.
Like,
That's awesome.
And we're like, "Oh, man, dang it.
Yeah.
I guess heaven may not be so bad after all if it's just a bunch of knitting.
yeah. Yes, I love crocheting.
So I know. Let's touch on. There are a couple things that I know that you really wanted to.
Yeah, there are 3 things that we want to get to. For
Yeah,
sure.
I want to actually start here.
Okay.
I want to talk about the events that led to your conversion to Christ.
Yeah.
I know you said Ben Shapiro was a part of that. Like, what was going on in the world at that time? What was going on in your mind?
Yeah.
And what was the catalyst to get you to open yourself to God's influence?
Okay. So this is pre-pandemic. I was pregnant. No, I had just given birth to my son. So I had a lot of time on my hands.
Okay.
Before that, I had been bartending and waitressing. And I was suddenly a stay-at-home mom. So
you got to
I
get
started
Skype,
get
boss.
into
It's not hard to do,
Jungian
mate.
philosophy.
Okay.
And like looking into like shadow work and trying to become I forget the word that he uses.
Ubermensch.
No, that's Nietzsche.
That's Nietzsche.
Oh, that's right. That's Nietzsche. That's right. I'm getting my German philosophers mixed
That's
up.
Superman.
Yeah. I like Nietzsche too, but it basically where like you become a fulfilled human being, like a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, ascension, that's going to bother me. But anyway, so I started to get into Jungian philosophy and I wanted to do shadow work.
What's that? What is shadow work?
So shadow work is, so you have like your persona and like your normal, just how you are every day and the things that you're interested in and that you like. But there is a shadow part to yourself and where everything that you reject about yourself, you put into your shadow and you like crush it down. And it's basically like everything that you consider like bad.
Diane, we were the test case for the COVID lockdowns. We know that. We were the most lockdown nation in the world. But my point is, they're not going out and building FEMA camps. If they're using quarantine stations, they're already there. They're not building them just for COVID people. And as far as I know, you posted 9 people got locked up in a COVID detention centre. That's 9 people. That's not FEMA camps.
Or wrong is what you put in your shadow.
Okay.
So shadow work involves going into your shadow and trying to, assimilate those things that you have pushed down in your past and assimilate them into your being so that you're a whole person. And a good way to tell what's been pushed into your shadow is in other people, whatever makes you mad in other people, like if whatever people do that annoys you is usually what's in your shadow. And you can project your shadow onto people and like you can.
That's interesting. I never thought of it like that.
And like everybody does this, where like you project your issues onto somebody else. Like that's your shadow essentially. The things that are bothering you and other people are your shadow. So I don't know. I just young and like his like dream interpretations and like all of like that kind of stuff I was super interested in, obviously, because I'm like a gothy nerd chick. So so one of the things at that time that really bothered me and other people were Christians and then conservatives. And there was a guy and I was doing like an outpatient rehab thing for my previous drug use, right? So there was a guy that was in recovery with me who was a Christian and a conservative, and we would get into arguments all the time. Like, and I'm pretty blunt, and like will just say whatever I'm thinking to people. And so like we would just butt heads constantly. And I was like, okay, what is like the one thing, obviously that guy, like that's immediately what I imagined my shadow to be, was this person. Like the angry red hat Trump guy was my shadow. So I like went on like this deep journey to try and like understand and like try to sympathize with conservatives, like just to like make myself like a wholer person. And you know, like when the 2016 election, obviously Trump won, and like I was shocked because I voted for Hillary. I was, you know, a good liberal.
We were too, and we voted for Trump.
Yeah.
We were shocked too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so there's no way like half the country are evil, bigoted racists.
Right.
So that also played into me trying to like understand things from like a conservative perspective. So I started listening to like
My brother's in Bali at the moment. He rings me up last night and he's caught COVID for the second time. And when I said, how many vaccinations have you had? He hung up on me, seriously.
the Daily Wire. I was like, who are the most popular conservative media? And like at that time I was like so entrenched in my bubble that like even just searching on Google for like conservative news, like nothing was Fox News, and then there was
Diane, I'll check that out.
nothing. Like they like trying to find conservative media at that time was like I don't know. Anyway, the algorithms. But so I started listening to Ben Shapiro and Andrew Klavan. Those were like the two main ones that I was into, and they eventually I came to. All right, so we had talked about this earlier. So I feel like there's like a mass brainwashing going on, like just having come from like the liberal, like far left persuasion. When I first started listening to the Daily Wire, like I would get so upset, like visceral reactions from anything they would say that was like negative about Hillary Clinton or Obama. Like I loved those people. Like they were my icons, you know, like my idols or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it took like listening multiple times to like the same episode or anyway for it to like click and for me to like actually be able to hear
to get past your own noise, right?
Because all I would hear was them saying negative things about Clinton or Obama, and then everything else would just be like gone. So it so eventually I started hearing it, and like something weird happened, and then I started to see things from like a conservative's perspective, and I was like, what's going on here? So that was my like the long road out of liberalism, which was like the first step towards Christianity. Not that all Christians are conservatives, but I had to like get past that hurdle. So with Christianity, obviously most people are fans of the Joe Rogan podcast.
Right.
And his first interview with Ben Shapiro, he is talking, I was listening to this podcast, and he is talking to Shapiro and asking him like, why do you believe in God? Like, why, like, what's the bit, like, what's your story, dude? And Shapiro says, and this is what God used, I don't know why, but he basically said that, so humanity is placed in a logical universe, and we have the ability to understand that universe. We have the unique ability to understand that the universe because we are the image of God. And like, that just, it was like the scales fell away from my eyes, and it was like, the universe, what? Like God's real? Like, and God, like, I don't know why he used that. So like, so I was like, okay, I have to read the Bible. I have to read the Old Testament. I was like, Christianity still isn't the answer. Like, no way, Christians suck. Like it's so maybe Judaism is the answer for me. So I started looking into Judaism, and like so
Diane, they don't report on the COVID vax here anymore at all.
I got the Hebrew Bible.
So we're not getting told about that.
And yeah, and I started to teach myself Hebrew, and
That's awesome.
I was reading the Old Testament. I get really into things, so but I kept having this issue while I was reading the Old Testament, where Christ would appear in the Old Testament, especially in Isaiah.
53.
Like, there is like the logos of God, like is Christ, right? Like that's what I
Physically
when I was little-
manifesting
right,
in
exactly.
the Old Testament. Yep.
Yeah. So, so I had first looked into Judaism, and then once like Jesus kept appearing in the Old Testament, and then like there are like fulfilled prophecies that are in Isaiah and throughout the Bible, but Isaiah specifically was really what turned me.
Thanks, Di.
And like the Dead
Love
Sea
you, Lynx.
Scrolls, and like they have proven that it's like physically proven that Isaiah, the scroll Isaiah, existed like 400 years at least before Christ. And like I didn't know at that time that Christ was a historical figure either. Like I thought that there was no proof. Like he's just like this made up guy that Christian men were using to control women and to control the world. And like that was my perception of it. So
Wow.
So I looked online. I was like, did Jesus exist? And I was like, proof for Jesus. And like, there is more proof that he existed than like most of the other historical figures that we take for granted.
Oh, man.
Like, like there are extra biblical, like things that aren't in the Bible mention correct.
Diane, just so you know, the ABC is equivalent to the CNN. They're full-on lefties. I'm not saying what you posted's wrong. I'm just saying they're very, very left-minded.
It's like contemporarily like existing and like dying on the cross. So like that actually.
Yeah, tricky. Some people just never recover from that. I had a pretty bad childhood. I won't go into it either, but I had my moments.
Happened.
Yeah.
And like that was like a big thing for me.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah, the Isaiah scrolls, and then Christ like actually having existed. And so that was my conversion really. But that was like the logical conversion, like the emotional conversion happened later. But yeah, so I went from, and because I was all into Jung, I got into, he says that Christianity is the answer for the future, but it's Catholicism. Catholicism is the answer according to Jung, because of the Mary figure. So there's Christ and there's Mary, and they're like the dualism, so he thinks that there has to be like a balance between male and female for like the psyche. So so I got into Catholicism.
Big mistake.
Lost me there. So close.
I think it's really cool how you got to, get the Hebrew Bible. You said, well, I'm going to, I don't want any of that Christianity stuff, but I'm going to at least read the Old Testament. And you start reading the Old Testament, you really got into Isaiah, which Isaiah is known as the fifth gospel. They call it the fifth gospel.
I never knew that.
Yeah, because there are so many prophecies about Christ, talking about who he is. And that led you to, basically, this is what these love. You start reading the Bible.
And like this, Isaiah is what people use for like Jewish people who like you want to convert, or you're trying to like give the gospel to. Showing them Isaiah is a big turning point for a lot of people.
I've heard that about Daniel too. Daniel's prophecy of the 69 weeks between the Jews building the wall in Jerusalem again, and 470 years later when the Messiah comes into Jerusalem, as the prophecy goes, and exactly 470 years later, almost to the day, Jesus rides into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, fulfilling all these prophecies, and that's converted a lot of Jews actually to Christianity.
It's amazing.
I'm into that.
So talk about You mentioned the emotional conversion that happened later on.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable talking about that? Would you mind?
Yeah. Yes. So I logically, like, I knew that Christianity was the answer, and but I wasn't going to like church at this time. And then so I hadn't asked for forgiveness, right? So like I knew, like, I could sit down and like read about Christianity and like, or like argue with somebody about it, like my husband, and try. All right, let me step back. So the emotional conversion happened when I started to pray finally. Like, prayer didn't come naturally to me because I had never prayed. And then I started to feel convicted about my sins and like the things that I had done. Like, so it took a while for me to start grieving for like the person that I used to be, and like feeling like that. I don't know if it's humility or the word that I'm looking for, but so
Remorse?
yeah, remorse.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah.
it took a while for me to feel like remorse and for it to like really like hit me. And like I remember my son was maybe like, he was less than a year old, and I remember just it finally like hit like a wave, like everything that I had done in my past, and like all of like the guilt that I'd been carrying, and like this like self-hatred for the things that for the way I have been. And like I was like sobbing on the floor and like begging God to like forgive me and to like to just take it. Like, I was trying to give it to him. And there wasn't like anything like visibly like spiritual that happened, but like there was like this weight that was like lifted off of me in that. And like, after that is when really like the Holy Spirit began moving in me, although I guess it was moving in me before that too. But that's when I started to notice like my feelings change and like my desires start to change, and like the fruit of the Spirit, essentially.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Wow. Very cool. And so that was your response. Did you become Catholic for a while? Like, did you start going to Catholic church, or did you? So talk about that.
Yeah, so I had started to obsessively watch like Catholic priests and like teach classes and talk about like Catholicism and like the doctrines and everything. And I started to go to the RICA, I think it's RICA, RICA or ICA.
Yeah, RICA.
Yeah, I started to go to those classes and
RCIA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. RCIA.
I got my acronyms wrong. Yeah, the Rite of Catholic Initiation for Adults, I believe is what it stands for.
Yeah. And the teacher.
Okay, so she's got to wake up from Catholicism because this is the first trip down Christianity. So you always advance with Christ if you're a diligent student. So if she's a diligent student, she won't stay with Catholicism. She'll go elsewhere where we are. So this is going to be interesting to see how she plays out.
The people that were teaching that course used to be pagans also, and like used to be in the occult. And like I think that there's like this natural attraction for pagans to Catholicism.
Absolutely.
Sorry for all my Catholic friends out there, but
yeah, just because they're more liturgical, more ritualistic, or
yes, and all the saints and like Mary, like Mary's a big deal, and like having I used to be a lesbian, so like
it's
women,
gynocentric. There's pageantry. There's an appropriation of pagan deities and rituals that get reincorporated with a Christian veneer on them. So it's like a perfect transitionary religion.
Exactly.
Yeah,
which is how when Rome converted to Catholicism, they had to get the people to switch somehow. So
that's Romana, baby.
Yep.
Yeah. But I didn't stay long there. I went to maybe like 3 or 4 classes, And then, God moved me away from there. And I was like, this is not, having the idea of having to confess your sins before you can partake in communion.
Mhm.
Like you have to, or else something bad will happen. Like, it's like, what? Like, this is Christ.
Bas, John the Baptist lived on locusts and honey. So God did give him locusts to eat.
Christ meets you where you are. Like, you don't have to confess to some guy in like a necktie. Like, what does that have to do
Yeah.
with Jesus?
Right.
So
That's Jesus's
Yeah.
job in a way, because you can't go before the Father or before the white throne with any blemish, but that's
Yeah.
sort of what the blood of Christ is for.
Right.
Exactly
It's
right.
the coal in Isaiah where it like touches your lips, like
Yep.
and purifies you. That's the blood of
Yeah.
Christ. Like that's
Yeah.
Amen.
so it's,
The whole point.
That's
Yes.
awesome. That's
exactly.
I want to ask, well, I know we want to get to one. We're saving one question that we all three really want to talk about, but I wanted to ask, why do you think, and it kind of ties into what we were just talking about with Catholicism, why do you think lesbianism and witchcraft are tied together? Like, did you consider yourself a lesbian and then that sort of led to witchcraft, or did you get into witchcraft first and then started to gear towards lesbianism? Did they sort of yin yang around each other? Like, talk about that.
Good question.
It was more of like a yin. Yeah, it was like sort of woven together.
Yeah.
So I had, since I was young, have loved women. I think my parents getting divorced and like being raised by a strong woman, and then some other things happening. Anyway, like psychologically, like I preferred women.
Mhm.
And like we're beautiful, we're like fun to talk to as like a woman, and like not that men aren't beautiful, but just obviously we're very different.
We're not. We need.
You're
these
beautiful in your
products.
own
We
way.
need these products just to get by.
Yes. The
Giordani
manscaping.
Jovanovich.
So, but women, like, we bring life into this world. Like,
Yep.
women are awesome. So, I had a preference for women, and then as like as a teenager, there's hormones going on everywhere, and then I discovered Wicca, and there was like this. I feel like it's like a natural attraction towards it. As somebody who
Okay, I never knew that, guys, that locusts were a type of yam. I never knew that. And Tricky and Vash, you both said the same thing, so let it be established with two witnesses. I now am converted that he ate yams.
preferred women to like they're all the goddesses, and it's very like woman centric, like it's
Mhm.
and like they portray history in a way where it's like the man always pushing the woman down, and like
The
women
oppressor.
we're oppressed by men, and like women have to stand together and like fight the man, and like there's a lot of that in Wicca, and like they're all the goddesses. The goddesses are the main attraction, versus like
Gotcha.
the Sky Father, whatever you want to call him.
Mhm. Yeah, invisible guy daddy.
Yeah.
I asked that because I've known so many godless women who all fall into two things: some form of witchcraft, and then lesbianism.
Mhm.
Like it's almost like you can almost set your watch by it.
So
Mhm.
compatible. It's almost irresistible for some.
Yeah.
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 I think that goes all the way back to Genesis, like with Eve and the apple and the serpent, and like you
That's
can
exactly
be like
what I was about
God.
to say. Yep.
Yeah, like you can have God's will, like you can be God if
Yeah.
you eat
Yeah.
from this apple. And I think that there is like a natural, like instinctual pull for women to
Yeah, Vash, when Mary visited John the Baptist's mother, John left in the womb because he knew Jesus was in the other womb.
to be like that. I don't know. Like most of the women I've met anyway, unless
Right.
they're, anyway, our generation of women, yes. I can't speak for the older generations. I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on there.
Jerry Spradley has an excellent comment. There's some pretty ugly women out there.
Yeah.
I'm a
Cheers.
dude. I didn't want to say it,
Yeah, I'll say it.
but it is true. It is
Yeah.
true, and there are some pretty, Adonis-like men out there.
There's some very pretty boys.
Yeah, there are some pretty boys.
Yeah. God love them.
Yeah.
Tricky, are they talking about you, buddy?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say for women it's different. For me, I'm not a very like sexual person. Like I don't like lust after people, and visually, like the way somebody looks, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me, and I think that's normal for women. Like you can look past like the whatever you look like as long as you're not like as long as you're not like an a-hole. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
and even then, we might still like you.
Yeah, well, you might like them because of that, actually. Yeah, depending on how
maybe.
pathological your psychology is.
Yeah.
And
I was in a very abusive relationship with a woman for like 7 years.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
they're not good to me. So,
I've heard a couple of those stories too. Yeah. that is.
I don't hear them.
I was just going to say I think that's far more common than a lot of people are willing to admit in this new age that we live in.
Yeah.
That's such a glorified thing.
The relationship that I was in was very, very toxic. And like I have like my ears gauged, and they used to be much bigger. And we got into a fight once, and like she pushed me, and like my ear caught and like ripped, and like there was like a whole mess over here.
Oh man.
So that's why they're so little now. But like there were like some physical altercations that happened, and I've never well, I've been married. I've been with my husband it'll be 8 years in January. And like nothing like that's ever happened.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
Yeah.
Like,
From what I understand from our conversation, you came out of that lesbianism before you came to Christ.
Yes.
Do you mind talking about that whole process coming out of lesbianism? What was the catalyst for that?
So I had been with this person, this woman for 7 years, and she had her mental state had dissolved essentially, and like we were doing like a bunch of drugs, and some people like things like marijuana, like it can trigger like psychosis, and so she became very depressed, and she was losing her mind, and I was taking care of her, and it like my whole life was revolving around taking care of this person who hated me. Like she was so mean to me, and like it and I just kept going because I thought I was in love with her, and it like I worked maybe like 5 miles from our apartment, and I would like take my lunch break and go and like try to get her out of bed to make sure she like went to school, and like she treated me terribly, and like she like knew exactly what to say to like rip at me, and like women are very like perceptive, like emotionally, and so I feel like, and as her mental state dissolved, like she knew like just the right things to like say that would cut me, so it was just not a good situation. And after I finally left and like started to pull away from that,
Hey, welcome to the channel,
and get some distance, it was more of like I'm not like a lesbian anymore, but I was like, I'm never dating a woman again. Like, this is women, like, I don't know, like the hormones, like at the same time, and like we sync up, and like it is, we do not balance each other out. Like we are not meant to be partners like that. Like I think like women can live together in like a communal way and like make that work, but like not like a woman cannot replace a man. Like God designed us to like fit together. Like we have roles, and a woman cannot fill a man's role. And I had to learn that the hard way. But after I finally like escaped that situation, and like when you're in an abusive relationship, there's like a cycle that happens, and you get addicted to the cycle, and it feels like you can't escape. Like, cause you're always waiting for like the good times. Like you remember like the good times, and like when you're going through like the cycle of like of abuse, anyway, it's just addictive. So once I finally made it out of that, I was like, all right, not doing that again. And then I think I was single for 6 months, almost a year, and I met my husband.
Cool.
The man who would be my husband.
Right.
At a New Year's party, he had his AR-15, and I was
like
liberal. Well, he's great. But I was a liberal at the time, and I was like, you have an AR-15? Like, what? And you like shot it at the party, and like, I was like, man, who is this guy? But he was so sweet to me. Like, he's the nicest, kindest person I've ever been with, and like, you know, obviously I have a record of not the greatest people in my life. So he helped me to get in.
Yeah, we like the Gosslings too. Actually, the Gosslings show up on the chat sometimes, so they're part of the family here. Al?
The rehab and to like straighten myself out, and anyway, yes. So
that's awesome, man. That's so cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kind of a follow-up question to that story. Actually, Jay Reese had a great question. She says, I'll just put it up on the screen here. She says, Shannon, can you contribute anything to the conversation of how the church should be to those coming from a homosexual lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Jay.
I think taking like a more sympathetic route instead of like condemnation or, you know, or judgment, like taking a more sympathetic position versus like you're an abomination. Like I've met people coming out as having been previously a lesbian was very difficult for me, because there's a huge stigma attached to it, especially for Christians, because you know the politics surrounding all of that. People are up in arms about it, but you know, calling somebody an abomination and like not giving them the love of Christ, that's not gonna. It just pushes people away.
Yeah, sure, and that's a big word, abomination. I mean, there are a lot of things in the Bible that are abominations to God. Proverbs says that a proud look, a haughty spirit, a lying tongue. They're all, you know, the Lord hates 6 things, 7 are abomination to him. It goes down that list. They use that word. So to call someone that would be, it's not going to be productive. Let the Holy Spirit convict people, but like, how should the church bring these people in and minister to them?
I think instead of like focusing on somebody because they're gay or lesbian, like really emphasizing that you're more than your sexuality, will probably go a long way. Like your identity is not the person you're sleeping with. It's not the sex of the person you're sleeping with. Like you are more than being a lesbian. You're more than a gay man. Like you are a child of God. Like you are more than that.
You're more than your pronouns.
Right. Exactly. It's just narcissism.
Yeah, it really is. Well, and that's such a struggle because one, we live in a current pop culture that tells you that your sexual identity, your pronouns, your gender preference for the hour or the day is a badge of honor that you should wear at all times and flaunt and carry your life, as your anchor point, as your lodestar through life.
Yep.
And then also the church has this really big problem. Like the problem, 20, 30 years ago was being so cruel or calloused, towards, gays and lesbians who, wanted to be a part of God's community. Now the problem has become so politicized and, sexuality has become so weaponized that churches, I think, they are overly permissive and catering to that now. And I've watched it blow up at least 2 churches, here in town because of it, and there's a difference between, it's like the church has a really tough struggle because, a really hard road ahead because it has to choose, it has to walk this fine line between not being permissive, but not being condemnatory either,
Yeah.
and that's a real tough thing to so it's like, how do you treat it? Do you treat it like you would treat an alcoholic, or would you treat it, like someone who, is a recidivist, convict, like, how do you kind of approach that is very, very tough for a church. And again, like if you're not a fully inclusive church in the 21st century, then like you'll probably wind up on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Have your
Oh,
501c3 status.
hang on, it didn't
yanked
come
for,
up.
Hate crime.
Yes.
Well, I feel like it can be a fine line, but I think that being sympathetic towards people who feel like they're locked into like a sexual identity and like that's who they are, is different from hanging like the pride flag out and like having, like
Yeah.
the drag queen story hour, like at the church or whatever.
Yeah, AI, we got about 6 or 7 guys like Derek Gilbert, the Sharpening Report, and we've got about 6 or 7 guys that we faithfully show because they're the rock stars of this genre, as you just mentioned. So, yeah, we do play them all.
Like
Yeah.
that.
And if we play something that's a little bit we don't like, we'll call it out as well. And AI, anything's on the table here, anything you want to debate about, bring it up and we can debate it.
There's still like a lot of things that churches can do without like going all the way into wokeism,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a way to be compassionate and welcome people in and love them without holding their feet to the fire and burning them at the stake, and also on the other hand just like handing them the keys to the kingdom and saying, no, you're perfectly fine just the way you are.
You have to have mercy and truth.
Yeah.
You have to have mercy and truth.
Yep.
That's a hard road to walk.
Yeah.
Built of truth. We learned about that today in Ephesians. Anyway.
That's awesome.
Oh man. Oh, I was gonna say something. Also another piece of advice for people who want to like welcome people who are of the like the LBGT blah blah blah, that so don't expect people to like change straight away. So like if you bring your gay friend over, like start bringing them to church and they're thinking about joining Christianity, like you can't expect like all of their lifestyles to change. Like the Holy Spirit moves, but he can work instantly.
He does it at his own time, exactly right.
Time. So I think like you can avoid promoting and like encouraging like hedonistic behavior, but at the same time, I think having patience.
Yeah, that's
and,
good
like,
advice,
being, like, a
Shannon.
gentle guiding hand.
Yeah.
When you got saved, did you sort of feel that stuff? Did you feel those desires going away, or did you have to really work hard at it to sort of, fight it? Sort of like someone trying to quit smoking or something.
No, I didn't fight like losing those desires. Like it happens like as it felt like a gradual lessening. Like I just, I can still, and like I still admire beauty, but it's not like I feel like the reason why like being a lesbian or being gay, like I feel like the reason that is wrong, or wrong, is because it is like a perversion and a corruption of like brotherly love or sisterly love. And like I have felt those feelings, like they're just not there anymore. And it's not something I tried to do. It was just God working in me.
So you were
And
delivered from it.
right, exactly. And he separately with cigarettes, he healed me of smoking. Like I could not quit smoking. I could not stop. Even when I was pregnant with my first son, like I still snuck a cigarette like once a day, Like I could not stop. And then after I was saved, I cried and was begging God to like take cigarettes, like the want to smoke, to take it away. And like I don't know why he did it, but like I have not smoked a cigarette since.
Wow,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Man, good for you.
Yeah.
That's
Praise
awesome.
God.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. I had, well, let me get back up to it here. See if I can find the comment. It was really good. I lost it.
Shannon, it's so adorable how Nick told me how nervous you were for doing this, but yeah, this is like probably one of the best interviews
Yeah, this has
we've
been-
had in like 6 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the
Super
and
The chat is going crazy.
it is. Yeah, I've had an eye on the chat too, and a lot of people are really
There's a
being
lot of
blessed by
positive
this.
feedback.
They're really being blessed by this.
No, that makes me
So
feel good.
Killing it,
Yeah,
kid.
this is awesome.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
You know, actually, real quick,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
cap off this whole segment, one thing that I think really also makes a big difference is that, like, it seems like you married a real man, a masculine man. And I think one of the biggest missteps that we as a society have taken, that I have noticed at least for 20 years, I'm sure it predates that, but I noticed it first with the metrosexual movement, is a lot of women want, gentle men. They want, they want soy boys, basically. And this is sort of like marrying a lesbian with an outie instead of an innie. And it's not only is it unfulfilling.
I wearing all the conspiracy theories, and actually, I believe in the reptilians as well. I'm pretty sure some of the guys here do as well, because we played some videos on it. But yeah, we're conspiracy theorists here, and we call it out if it's bullshit as well, though.
But it's just like, it's completely, it's such a mistake. But society teaches men to be more feminine, and the church teaches men too. It's my biggest gripe with the church, is like, the church does not teach men to be masculine warriors or to embrace masculinity, and it doesn't teach their women to embrace the masculinity of men and for men to be strong and honorable, but it teaches men gentle Jesus, meek and mild, and so men don't know what to do with their masculinity anymore, because they operate in a society that wants them to be, weak, wants them to basically, be like women, be more like a woman, cry more, and it just, so you dodged a major bullet by like marrying a dude.
That's why I said some of the guys die. Am I the only one that believes in reptilians? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was like, I do not want, like, I want to be with a man, like a man.
Right.
Like, I don't want to date a woman again. And like, I didn't intentionally like look for somebody who was more masculine. Also, he has become more masculine over the years. I think it's like, he also, anyway, he's a man. And that's like, I was done with all of that, there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
So
I think also was the Jungian word you were looking for earlier, archetype?
No, but I do like archetypes. No, it was the Yeah, it's like actualized, like the actualized being.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
remember exactly, but
I thought I
really
found it.
architect.
Isn't Jordan Peterson big?
Yeah, and Stephen Pressfield.
Onion. Yeah.
Yes.
Pressfield
they're
and
big in
Peterson
games.
both. Yeah, Peterson, like he talks all the time about incorporating the shadow.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good stuff, and it's stuff no one really wants to like. You think that you have a handle on, psychology and everything until you like sit down and really start trying to explore your own shadow.
Yep.
And it's like that part of Dune where Paul says to the Bene Gesserit, look into the place where you dare not see and you'll find me staring back at you. Like it is, it's some heady, scary stuff when you start really dissecting the shadow within you.
Yeah, and like they're I forget what it's called. There's like a process that Young talks about doing where like you it's sort of like dreaming, but you're like in your head. Oh man, I can't remember what it's called. But like one of the ways to explore your psyche is to essentially it's kind of like meditating, but like you intentionally like go into your head and like you're looking around and it's as if like your eyes are open and you're looking around in reality. I have to anyway, Young can there's some rabbit trails.
Yeah.
Like he goes deep.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend it. That's one of the reasons I like Jordan Peterson also. My dad introduced me to Jordan Peterson. I was like, oh, he likes Young? Like, yes.
That's part of your gateway.
And he's over with the Daily Wire now. He's over with the Daily Wire.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool. Well, you wanna transition to let's transition over to
the big topic we all wanted to talk about because it was so cool. And so
I'll let you ask a question. You can probably frame it better.
Sure.
I'll just ramble.
So Shannon, you had specifically mentioned this a little bit, and we had touched on it briefly.
AI, I haven't got the accent. It's my stream. It's you guys who have got the accent.
Supernatural experiences such as sleep paralysis, also referred to sometimes as hypnagogic or hypnagogia, hypnagogic experiences, and specifically the vibrational state.
Yep.
Talk about that.
So in a previous episode with Roxana, Nick had mentioned his experience where like he had felt like the vibrations. I forget the word you used.
Ceiling
Did you use
fan.
vibrations?
Yeah.
You thought it was the ceiling fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was not the ceiling fan. That's just your brain. Like it sort of incorporates things as you're coming out of that state.
Okay.
But it that's the vibrational state. So that's what happens. That's a part of the process of like if you want to astral project. That was something I got really into is astral projection.
Jamie's literally just mentioned that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Astral, because I told her. But
Gotcha.
yeah. So when I learned how to astral project and I got very into that and it works, like it's a real thing, like you can do it, although I do not recommend it because you open yourself up. I've talked to people where like they say they felt something ride back in with them, like when they went back to their body. So I have not done it since being saved, but I've felt it start to happen and like praying like to Jesus, like stops it from happening, which is
No, AI, I was joking. Don't say nigger Jim. Because wasn't nigger Jim the guy on the raft and Huckleberry Finn talked to him or something? I saw the movie and read the book when I was a kid. But yeah, I wasn't saying don't say nigger Jim. I was actually trying to be funny.
Praise God. Like I feel like now that I'm saved and I don't want to astral project anymore, like I feel like demons or whatever like try to like pull me out sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
it's the same thing that happens with alien abductions.
Right. It's the same. Yeah. The first time that happened to me, I thought I was being abducted by an alien. I was like 16. Yeah, and I was at my dad's house, and like I woke up, and like I heard the vibrations, and like I saw like flashing lights, and like I couldn't move, and I thought I really and truly believed I was being abducted by aliens, and I did not know what had happened. This was before smartphones. Like so after it happened, I couldn't like jump on the internet and like look it up and see what happened, like or see if anybody else had experienced that. So I thought, yeah, I'd been abducted by aliens. So, but eventually I did look it up, and it's, the sleep paralysis, but that is also like the first step towards astral projection. So
Could never
you teach
do
yourself
that.
to do it by intentionally triggering sleep paralysis, and the vibrations that happen are your brain waves. So when your body is asleep and like your brain is asleep, like the type of waves that you're producing change, they become like,
Okay,
deeper
Triggy, good luck,
and,
mate.
like,
Love you, mate.
larger. So some people, when they reach sleep paralysis, like a part of your brain wakes up, but the rest of it is still asleep. So you can feel and hear like the vibrations that your brain is putting out. And it, I don't know, it's not that a lot of people think there's like paranormal stuff tied to that. For me, like it can get so hard that like it hurts. Like the vibrations feel like a jackhammer, and like it hurts like through my jaw and like all up through here. But
Yeah, my ears were sore. My eardrums were sore. Like after I woke up, my ears were hurting.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like I
You
don't
think that could be forced on someone? Because I was not certain. I wasn't trying to do it. I didn't, and as it was happening, I wasn't wanting it to happen.
Yes.
It was against my will.
Yeah.
That any of this started happening to me.
Yeah, I think that's how like demons and stuff will like pull you out of your body, is through that process. So like absolutely, I've had it happen to me where like it's forced upon me and I don't want it to happen, and thank God, like praying it makes it stop.
Okay, guys, I had a sleep paralysis thing happen as well. And when I tried to move, my own energy was used against me. So it's not like you haven't got any choice in what's happening. If you try and struggle, your own energy is used against you. And these guys aren't picking that up. It's really freaky how it works.
So it like nothing's happened, but I've definitely had it happen where like I feel like something is trying to force me out. So it's pretty cool. It's interesting.
Did that kind of stuff happen from an early age? Did it happen when you started to like girls? Did it happen when you were in witchcraft? Did it happen after you got saved?
It started happening after, so at first it started happening after I got into witchcraft. And like I would have like shadow people, like I call them shadow people, like come at me like while like I was in that state, and like be trying to like strangle me. And anyway, I was plagued by shadow people. And that's one of the reasons I stopped doing witchcraft for a long time, was the entities messing with me.
Feel like so you feel like the witchcraft, the occult, made you vulnerable to those attacks?
Yeah, definitely, because I opened myself up to it. Like it's basically like putting a big sign out saying like, come play with me. Like I'll play back. Like I won't call Jesus on you.
So
right, yeah,
right. And those you would see, and that would happen. Those shadow people would attack you while you were in the state, while you're in the sleep paralysis state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you ever see them when you were not in that state?
Good question.
Like if I went a couple days without sleeping, I would start to see them, like in the peripherals. So. Yes.
And you felt them, you said they tried to strangle you, is that right?
Yes. Yep. Several occasions, like I would start to feel like their hands, as demons.
Did you ever feel, because there is that painting that
with Goya, with them sitting on the chest, like the demon thing,
and then the mare's head around the corner. Yeah, it's very creepy. There's what is that, probably, is that Renaissance or post-Renaissance painting? I can't remember exactly how old it is, but yeah, it's like the classic hypnagogia painting of the ghoul or the little demon sitting on someone's chest.
It's actually a print, I think. I don't think it's a painting. I think it's a print.
Oh, Is it really? Okay.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
Like he was into printmaking. I minored in printmaking in college.
Yeah.
So
Okay, cool.
we studied a lot of Goya.
That's awesome. Well, and a lot of people report that, you know, they feel something sitting on their chest
Mhm.
when they have those sleep paralysis. I had it. And there was a healthy amount of sleep deprivation that was happening during that
Good to
time. I
see
was
ya.
on upwards of 1,000 milligrams of antidepressants a day, you know,
Wow.
and so sleep was, and I was working a night job. So like sleep was kind of wonky. I was right in the middle of writing the books, you know, and so like it was a pretty active time, I think, internally or spiritual or whatever. And yeah, I remember there were some times where like things got a little weird in that apartment. So
Yeah, that will definitely, like, having like a weird sleep schedule can trigger it for sure.
Yeah.
That's how it happened for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another comment here by the branch. He says that during those states sleep paralysis, they also take your voice because of the power they have. You have to think his name over and over to help you break there, and that's exactly what happened to me. That's exactly what I had to do. It's the only thing I could do.
Yep.
I had to think. I had to keep thinking Jesus' name over and over, and it didn't work at first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but but eventually it did.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's exactly what I experienced. It's crazy.
There's a lot of confirmation about that. You know, I have a friend who had mentioned to me this channel on, I think it's on Telegram, it might be Twitter, where he compiled he sort of aggregated a bunch of anecdotal experiences from people who had all taken DMT and had all had these sort of experiences where you know they either went into someplace internally or externally, like astral projected, and they all would encounter, and these are not people who know each other. I think it was maybe aggregated from like some Reddit forums or something. I'm sorry, I don't have all the information off the top of my head, but they would go, you know, they would have these experiences with these other entities that would bless them with knowledge, and they would come to them, you know, as like benevolent entities. But the weird thing that would happen is in every one of these stories, these people would end up having these conversations, sometimes multiple times, with these ostensibly benevolent entities, and then whenever the person would maybe challenge the entity on something or question it, not even challenge it, just question it, the entity would on a dime turn vicious towards them. And then there were other times where other entities, you know, probably the same people that like certain people refer to as machine elves, you know.
I've heard that term.
Yeah.
Yep.
These, you know, these one entities would be communicating with the person, and then another one would come in, and then they would start fighting and arguing, or the first one would flee in terror of the second one because they were competitive. It was like basically like either fallen angels or demon lords or whatever, but they were clearly malevolent entities masquerading as benevolent and it took nothing for the masquerade to be over, you know, for the mask to slip.
As soon as you question it, they turn instantly. Like you think like this thing is your friend, like a spirit guide, and then if you question anything, like it's like the mask like drops. Like it transforms into I guess you know, like a malevolent being. Like I have a friend who, so you know, Demi Lovato is into astral projection and communicating with aliens, and I know a few people who are also into that, and it I don't know, it's very sad. Some of that stuff seeps into some churches too, like Christianity.
Oh yeah,
and
like yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah. Yoga. But all these beings have the same message. They're always here to save humanity, and they're here to save the earth from humanity. They have to save humanity from humanity's self. And it's always like the green message, like the
Environmentalists.
environmentalism. Yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
There's nothing more insidiously anti-human than environmentalism. And I have had those arguments where people literally say the only way to save the planet is for us to stop having kids and there needs to be less people. And when you understand the spiritual connection between those two, you understand that, like, whether it's the fallen or demons or, you know, whatever, you know, it's really either of those two. They covet the earth, and Satan, you know, and Satan was granted dominion over the earth.
Yep.
You know, that's the whole temptation of Christ. You can't offer what's not yours give. You know, and we are squatters to them. They hate us because we are usurpers to possibly everything that they have worked so hard to build, you know?
We're made out of dust. Like, who are these beings made out of dust? Like,
and after all we struggled for to, you know, to compose this world with Lucifer, you know, and, you know, operating as the conductor, and we created the garden, you know, of Eden, and then these humans come along and take it all from us. Like, this is ours. So you convince them, save the planet, have an abortion. You know, I mean, I won't mention his name, but one of my favorite comedians, you know, and this is like, you know, whatever, but like one of his taglines was "abortion is green," you know, and he has a very funny comedy routine based off of it.
Sick, but it does truly reflect kind of the.
But that is the message.
Yeah, the narrative.
Yeah, it is an intensely anti-human message, and they always do. You know, there was the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and that was the whole thing. You know, the Keanu Reeves movie where he's, you know, yeah, so you're not missing much. It's a remake, but it's the same thing where he's an alien. He comes to Earth, and he comes to Earth to tell the humans to, like, stop destroying the planet. You know. Or else, you know.
Well, you know, the all those people that keep having the experiences from, you know, aliens, and those messages from aliens, and it's all the same message. We're basically here to help save you from yourselves. You know, L.A. Marzulli talks about the disclosure and the coming of these beings being really, it's going to be the Great Deception. It's going to be the next Great Deception, because people are going to see those things. Millions are going to fall away from their faith. But I think that we'll really see it around. I think they'll make their official deceptive appearance globally, big scale, wide scale, you know, when something like a nuclear weapon goes off. You know, that'll be the catalyst. Because there's been this stair-stepping of disclosures happening over the past several years. When something big happens, the aliens will show up and teach us how to save ourselves and what everything is really all about, and who actually created us. And what's funny about those messages is that none of them validate anything that God has said in His Word. You know, none of them. They'll validate everything else. But,
everything else but Christianity, unless it's some mutated Luciferian, you know, version of Christianity that's like
Unitarian.
Unitarian message. Like we're all fine, and God is just love. And,
the Christ consciousness.
Yes, the Christ consciousness. What's the other name for that? I mean, it's the New Age concept, but theosophy. That's what it is. Theosophy. And
Helen Blavatsky founded that, right?
Yes. Well, she wasn't the originator, but that's what we like. It's all the same thing. Like going all the way back to like Babylon. It's like the same thing. We think it's new. It's the new cool thing, and like it's been happening for thousands of years. It's literally the same thing.
That's the interesting thing about that stuff, is that it is called the New Age, but there's nothing new about it. So it really makes you kind of wonder how old are things really, civilizationally. You know, I hear a little one in the background. Mom, it's time. Come on! I want my
Oh, we're good.
I want my meatloaf.
Yeah,
I want it now.
meatloaf now.
Chicken nuggets.
Chicken nuggets, yes. You know what?
Yeah.
How dare I stand in the way of chicken nuggets?
No, you guys are fine. Sorry.
Rose,
My
go
speaker's
ahead.
too good. My mic is picking up everything.
I think it's cute. I like it. I like when there are like real world distractions, or
Yeah.
interactions that are not part of the show. Like that's kind of like my favorite moments,
Oh, really? It breaks the fourth wall or whatever.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it
kinda
makes it more
brings the
human,
illusion. Yeah.
It adds authenticity to it, Like
Yes.
if a kid bounces in here and accidentally pukes on the keyboard, like
Or my old
Sucks
dog
for you, but
decides
I
to
think it's
wake up
cute.
and comes over here and starts nudging it.
yeah,
She's sleeping back there.
yeah, she's hanging out.
I think she's still
No.
alive. Yeah, we'll see.
Nick's just waiting for a bird.
I'll know in a couple days.
Just wants a parrot. Yeah. Roseanne, one of our patrons, I think she knows you guys too. I think you guys are all friends. She made the comment, first of all, that what was the other one? New Agers. She made two that were really funny. She said New Agers are just unpleasant.
Yes.
and they're like, that's the thing. There's so many. I don't know any happy, well-adjusted, friendly, witches / lesbians. Like, maybe you were one back in the day. I don't know, but like
I thought I was happy, but I was pretty miserable. Like
Really?
drinking all the time, like drinking myself at the table, and drugs, and I was miserable, and I didn't see it until I was saved. Until like you look back and like all the behaviors, like I was just participating in self-destructive behavior over and over and over again. Like, is happiness. Well, what is happiness really? But
contentment, purpose,
yes,
peace and quiet.
purpose. Yes, yeah, but
A nap.
yeah, some of the most miserable people I've ever met were rich lesbians. But I love women. I love
Sure.
everybody. Like no judgment on lesbians.
Wow,
Rose-
that's interesting. The most unhappiest people she's ever met are rich lesbians. Wow.
And use the word miserable specifically. She said, all the women I know that are self-proclaimed witches are miserable.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
I've known Roseanne since I was 16. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah, so she's seen it all.
That's awesome. How
Yeah.
cool. Let's see.
So what would be, we're coming up on 2 hours. We're getting close to the 2 hour mark.
Yeah.
What would be your message now on this side of the cross, now that you're a believer, and you see the younger generations now, because a lot of the deception now is happening among the younger generations. What would be your message to them, your warnings to them, and your message to them?
Well, I would
No
say
pressure.
it seems like it feels counterintuitive in a way, but freedom is found in the gospel. It can feel counterintuitive because you're giving up your own will to follow these rules that were set down like thousands of years ago, and it can feel like you're just going to be controlled. You become like a cog. You're giving in to the oppression, but that is a deception. And if you try it and you just try to open your mind, especially with like today, like having an open mind is like the highest honor, really. Like the best you can be is to be so open that your brain falls out. So you like try and like hold on to that, and like look at the gospel, and like I'm telling you, like this is where life is. Like this is my life began truly when I was saved, and then also when I
Amen.
had children. So get married and have kids. But
All right. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome. I love it. Thank you for that.
yes.
That's great. Well, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So Instagram's the best way.
Okay.
Mama Shay OC. Yes, that's me.
Okay.
That's
All
where I'm also on Twitter, but I don't ever use it. But also Mama Shay OC, and then I'm pretty sure my Facebook is that also. But
Yeah.
anyway, Mama Shay OC.
Very cool. This has been really awesome. And, our prayer is that God takes this interview and gets it in front of the people that need to hear it, need to see it, and that he uses it.
Yes.
Yeah, I can think of at least 2 people off the top of my head that I need to send this interview to right now.
Yeah. I pray every day for God to use me and use the numerous mistakes that I made to reach out to anyone, at least one person. If one person can hear my testimony and come to know God, that makes everything worth it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you were delivered from it. That's the
Yes.
thing. I think there's
Yeah, you're right, Vas. The fentanyl comes from China, and I'm pretty sure they go through Mexico to bring it into the States. But fentanyl's hit Australia now. I know people that have OD'd on fentanyl in the last 3 months. 2 got brought to life and 2 died.
so many people who, whether they were abused as a child, if they were traumatized, or if they just, feel too guilty, they feel like, they don't, despite the fact that the world constantly tells you how much you deserve everything and how you're okay and you're perfect just the way you are, there's still a lot of people who live in that world who really don't think they are worthy of any sort of redemption or salvation or help or hope, and so they continue to circle the drain because they don't have any sort of hope, but here you are, living testimony that when you walk away from that stuff, you can have a life, with a spouse, you can have a husband, you can have children, and you can have peace
And joy in your life.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, Vas. Good night, mate.
Patch.
Yeah.
If nothing else, if you're gonna refuse Christianity, then at least listen to Jordan Peterson because he the biblical those talks that he does about the psychology of the Bible.
Yeah.
Those are great.
Yeah.
If you act anyway. Yes.
Yeah.
Those are good.
Yes.
Those were my sort of gateway stepping stones back, and
That's
and I.
amazing.
Yeah, and I certainly have my
Okay,
qualms
I'm like,
with him about those. Maybe not so much now because I think he probably is a Christian now. He's been getting closer and closer to that over the past few years. But whatever, he talked about the Bible in ways that no one else did.
God's using them.
Yeah, God uses it. Yeah, God has for sure used Jordan Peterson.
Yep.
Yes.
Despite the agnostic or atheist libertarians who refuse to be Christian, but they still love Jordan Peterson. It's okay, well, fair enough, whatever.
Well,
just let God work on them too.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's my husband, basically, the agnostic libertarian. That's how he was, and then Jordan Peterson helped with bringing him over to our side.
Isn't that crazy? Unintentional.
Yeah.
Because that was not Jordan Peterson's intent. Jordan Peterson was not witnessing.
Yeah.
But God used him.
God uses him.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's awesome.
Yeah, man. When I first learned of Jordan Peterson, I was a believer, and I disagree with him on a lot of things, evolutionary psychology and all, a lot of those things. But man, the more and more I watched him, the more I was like, why don't we have people of this intellectual prowess
saying things like this in the pulpit?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Church. Yeah. We can't aspire to be as intellectual as.
No, he's arguably the
Peterson.
brightest living mind of our time.
For sure. But I do, I want to attain to at least that level of being that articulate.
Yeah.
And having a ready defense of my faith in the gospel.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to be as well spoken and clear and precise with language.
Yeah.
One of his rules for life, be precise with your words. I'd love to be precise like he is.
have good, have adroit
Apologetics.
articulation. Yeah, for your apologetics.
And AI, all the doctors are in on it as well, prescribing it like there's nothing wrong. It's a really bad system. Guys, I might give the Goslings a miss now. They're only going for another 15 minutes. Pretty sure we covered the subject. So I've got this to finish off with. It goes for an hour, I think. Let me have a look. Already loaded it. Okay, the Watchmen, everything is about to change forever. These guys are good.
Thank you all so much for your prayers and support. God bless.
A shocking new study from the nonprofit Families Against Fentanyl shows child fentanyl deaths are rising faster than...
No way! They just happened to talk about fentanyl. Guys, I didn't know that. Wow.
any other age group. Deaths among children age 14 and under are 15 times higher than they were in 2015, rising from 10 to 153 deaths. In just the last 2 years, fentanyl deaths quadrupled among infants and children ages 5 to 14.
In the time that this broadcast is on, one person more will die. That's about every 8 minutes. We're seeing the numbers grow by basically 50% every year. We're seeing that there's very little recovery once you're addicted.
If you thought Portland was bad, take a look at San Francisco. There's 20,000 homeless people in Nancy Pelosi's hometown, and looks like opium dens just pop up everywhere. Any moment you see someone shooting up or ODing on the sidewalk. Hey, buddy, wake up. Hey, police department, you okay?
Oh, she's passing it. Oh, City, look at her. She's going to pass it over. Oh, let me take you into that crack pipe.
You're fentanyl addict.
My husband got me started on heroin 2012.
I'll say it again. Here's the fire department. Still one, guys. This is just tragic. Somebody must do something. This is absolutely out of control. This is a day-to-day thing.
What I saw today on the streets of Philadelphia, what I saw is not only heartbreaking, it's terrifying. This was block after block after block. You could see people shooting up methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, and the drug that you are talking about is xylazine. It is a tranquilizer that is used on animals. It is not meant to be used in humans.
Tranq is short for tranquilizer, in this case, xylazine. It's strong enough for big animals like horses. When it's mixed with fentanyl,
I might have to delete this.
It gives users a brand new kind of high.
So like they start dancing and they seem kind of happy and they're just having fun, to an immediate like zombie like trance, like staring through you as if like a horror film.
What it does to the human body is so terrible it looks like a film effect. But in cities on the East Coast where Tranq first spread, it's all too real.
You know, all those arms, it's called necrotic, the tissue underneath the chest. So right here where you see this green stuff coming out, that's because you have pus.
Dr. Jen joins us now with the topic I'm actually a little surprised we're talking about, even though it's such a huge trend right now. We're talking about microdosing mushrooms. Moms across the country are using them to treat anxiety and depression. We're talking about the use of psychedelics recreationally, but also therapeutically. A lot of new moms are reaching for things like mushrooms or psilocybin in micro doses. But again, what that micro dose is a big question mark, as a way to kind of manage mood disorders. So I think it's a very interesting phenomenon. There's a lot of interesting science behind it, but it is sweeping the country in terms of its recreational use, and it's very, very unregulated right now.
From gummies to chocolates, many cannabis edibles look a lot like regular snacks. But these THC-infused products are catching more than adults' attention. A report out today from medical journal Pediatrics reveals the rate of children under 6 eating cannabis edibles is skyrocketing, rising more than 1,300% in recent years. Nearly all of the exposures reported happened in the child's own home. and more than a fifth resulted in hospitalization.
Good morning from the beautiful city of Portland, Oregon.
These are images and video from an army of citizen journalists in Portland who have been documenting a city in decline. Public drug abuse, addicts sprawled on the sidewalks or wandering the streets. Tent encampments on many street corners and fires seen burning along the roadways.
I've seen these videos, the homelessness in America, and guys, it's really stunning when you see the poverty. You don't realize that side of America exists until you see stuff like this. And it's really, really horrific. They got all this poverty, yet they're sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine. Yet they can't even house their own people.
Used to be one of America's most beautiful and livable cities is being slowly destroyed by epidemic levels of crime, drug abuse, homelessness, and mental illness. One local is called Portland an open-air insane asylum. Portland has become a mecca for addicts and drug dealers who have migrated here from across the country to take advantage of weak drug laws. It's also attracted drug cartels. There were 11 drug overdoses on March 31st alone, and one pill of fentanyl can cost as little as $1. Things got worse for the city when Oregon voters approved Measure 110. It decriminalized possession of small amounts of drugs, making it a healthcare issue and not a crime. Police officials say it's led to a huge increase in the amount of drugs on the streets, which has led to a surge in crime. It wasn't always like this.
Portland, Oregon, one of the nation's most beautiful cities. The citizens of Portland attend many fine churches. It is a family town, a good place to bring up children.
In Portland today, a viral video shows a man using drugs in front of a child. Just last week, a man beat someone with a golf club in front of this Portland restaurant. The nervous owners then offered the attacker hot coffee, which he dumped on the victim. 79% of businesses surveyed in Portland have been victims of vandalism or break-ins. 19% have been vandalized at least 5 times. Walmart and Cracker Barrel are part of a wave of businesses that have fled the city. More than 2,600 downtown businesses have left.
It's not funny anymore. We like to go back to where Portland was just weird. Now it's scary.
One writer asked, how long does it take for a city to die?
The Apostle John used a very interesting word in the book of Revelation to describe society in the last days, as we read in Revelation 21:8 and 9:21. But the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And they did not repent of their murders, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts. Sorceries is the Greek word pharmakia, which means the use of drugs, potions, and enchantments, poisoning, pharmacy, by extension, the occult, witchcraft, by implication, the remedy, the cure. The actual word that John used for sorceries is the Greek word pharmakia. John did not choose to use the Greek word for an actual sorcerer, but rather he used the word to describe what those types of people did in the first century. Sorcerers made magic potions and compounds to ward off spirits and also for physical healing. The Greek word pharmakia is where we get the modern day word pharma, or drug. We also get the words pharmacy and pharmaceutical from that original Greek root word. What the Apostle John saw in his vision of the world in the last days was a society ruled by drugs. When the Apostle John saw his vision of what society would look like in the last days, one word came to his mind, pharmakia. Never in mankind's history has there been a time where the use of drugs was so prevalent in a culture. And never has there been a time when such drug use actually had broad support for its legal use. Jesus said, as a sign of his coming and the end of the age, there would be an increase in deception, false Christs who will deceive many, wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, Christian persecution, apostasy, false prophets, and lawlessness, causing the love of many to grow cold. Jesus said all of these signs would come like birth pains. Jesus was likening last days events to a woman in labor. As the labor progresses, the pains increase in both frequency and intensity until the baby finally comes. As we get closer to Jesus' return, all the signs he gave us as a sign of his coming and the end of the age will become more frequent and more intense. All of these signs are manifesting around the world in our time.
We're taking a look at troubling new data from the CDC. It reveals sexually transmitted infections are on the rise and also show no signs of slowing down. NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Sile joins us now on this. Hey, Dr. Sile, good to see you. So just how many cases are we seeing, and do we have any idea what is the reason for this uptick?
We're seeing about...
Okay, all right. If you've seen the movie, it'll make sense to you. If you haven't seen the movie, it'll just be gobbledygook.
2.5 million cases of chlamydia, of gonorrhea, and syphilis combined. That is up from last year, and it's continuing to rise. It's up about 7% over the last 5 years. And Savannah, the one we're really worried about here is syphilis. Syphilis it's an STI that can actually cause, if you get this during pregnancy, it could cause your baby to be born stillborn or dead. And it's an entirely preventable disease with something called penicillin, a common antibiotic. So in talking to the CDC, that's the one that's really most disturbing to them right now, that rise in syphilis. But when looking at why are cases rising, there's a couple things that experts are pointing to. The first is decreasing condom use among people who are sexually active. The other thing is the rise in substance abuse right now, kind of linked towards that behavior. And the last, lack of access to healthcare and lack of access to education about how to have safe sex, how to prevent these STIs from occurring in the first place, Savannah.
So what does the CDC say needs to be done to slow down this trend, to address some of those issues that we just had up on the screen?
A couple things. I think the first and one of the most important is really reducing the stigma around these diseases, being able to go to your doctor's office and just talking to them about this stuff. I think that can go a long way. But, in talking to some experts who track this stuff for a living, the thing they really point to is getting STI treatment and testing really, really accessible, meaning you should be able to order STI tests just like you do a COVID test. Maybe on Amazon.com, you get a test straight to your house. Really, really getting tests in the hands of people. And the last thing really is just, in terms of looking at future prevention, there is some exciting new data that taking doxycycline, a really cheap, common antibiotic, can actually prevent STIs, just taking them prophylactically.
All right, and that's something that maybe we'll see more information or more research on?
Exactly. That's one thing that is one of the most exciting and controversial fields in the world of...
Okay, I didn't think that was going to be what it was, so I found something else. Genesis 6 and the Sons of God. And it's Prophecy Watchers, and they're a good channel, so this should be interesting. And this will take us out, guys.
Good to be here.
Yes. So I had really, please don't hate me when I say this, I had seen you once on Pablo's show, but other than that, I really didn't know who you were. Then JB Hickson, who's a very good friend of mine, suggested that I chit chat with you because I have his 2 books back here, Spirit of the Antichrist, about the Nephilim. Because, let me just start off the bat, Mondo, with the scripture in Genesis 6. I have heard about the Nephilim. I don't know if you're aware. I think he's been long gone for over 10 years. Alan Horvath or something like that. He used to be on YouTube. He was he was a Jewish guy, would I think smoke his pipe or something like that. Really big on the Book of Enoch. And I think he was the one who kind of made me not believe in the Nephilim because he just seemed way, way out there, Okay. So anyway, when I was talking to JB, he had said, hey, you need to talk to Mondo. And I said, who? And he said, Mondo, and talk about the Nephilim, because you know why? And can I read Genesis 6 really quick, if you don't mind?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, because I want to keep it in context. It says, now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, sorry, my New York is going to come out, were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim, and this is where JB got me, and that's when I approached you in Orlando. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and I never caught this, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. So then I approached you in Orlando, and you gave me a lot of information, and I want to dive into that tonight because I want you to convince me, because you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, fallen angels and demons, you believe that that's two separate, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to open the floor to you, and I know we have some scriptures. So, but anyway, talk to me like I'm a 2-year-old.
Well, okay. Well, first I'll say that the challenge that we have in the modern church age is that this view, the idea of taking Genesis 6:4 straightforward and literal, is very, very minor. It's most modern churches or denominations or seminaries, they don't teach this. But we start with scripture, but we also start with church history. And what I mean by that is, if you go back to the time of Jesus and before, and you were to ask, well, what did the Jewish people believe back then? It was very crystal clear that they believed that the sons of God, it's very specific in Hebrew, that these sons of God came down and basically took human women as wives and created these offspring hybrids, which are known as the Nephilim. So it was well known back then. Everybody believed it. What you have is you have what people call the supernatural view, where the angels came down, and you have the non-supernatural view. So those are kind of the two perspectives. I would say that today, again, in the general church, they would say, no way, that's not even possible. What are you talking about? But I think it's not so much because they've studied it and very carefully. It's because it just sounds weird. Let's just be honest. It sounds weird.
Yes.
And but yet what we have is a variety of things that the first foundation, I think, is, do we believe in the supernatural? And it's interesting that some people that reject the angelic view of Genesis 6 still believe in angels. They still believe in demons. They still believe in all other supernatural nature. But I think it just takes a little bit of time to go, I've never heard this before, really? So there's a whole bunch of ways to tackle it. But the straightforward reading, if you look at the phrase there, the sons of God, it's B'nai Ha Elohim. It appears in Job chapter 1, Job chapter 2, Job 38. And most of those same scholars or teachers, they'll say, well, yeah, it does refer to angels in Job, but just not here. And you go, well, why? Because it's very specific phrase. There's another very close phrase that appears in the Psalms that also refers to angels. So now you have at least, I would say, 5 other references at minimum in the book of Job and the book of Psalms that weigh in on Genesis 6:2 and 6:4. So as you come to that, let's set a context. I think this is important. Now, this is very technical, but hang with me. We have like history, right? Okay, how do I want to do it? History's coming this way, which is human history, but then you have biblical history, written biblical history. So the Bible wasn't written, Moses didn't write the first books of the Bible until roughly about 1400 BC. Well, mankind had history long before that. They had been in Egypt for several centuries. They had been in the land for several centuries. So I want us to go to the time of Moses as an example, because that's an important context. So they come out of Egypt. They're making their way to the land along the east side of the Dead Sea, like modern day Jordan. I was just there last week, and I gave a teaching on this because I said, hey guys, here we are. It's amazing. So they come up and and Moses sends them out, right? Go, the 12 spies, go check it out. So they go check out the land, and they come back in Numbers chapter 13, and they're freaked out. 10 of them are freaked out because they said, oh, the Nephilim are there. And Moses is like, okay. And they said, they're big, they're gigantic, and we're scared. And of course they give the bad report. But Moses writes, the only other place the word Nephilim appears is in Genesis 6:4. And so Moses is talking to these guys, and he's saying, hey, you just saw the Nephilim. There they are in the land. They're tall, they're giant, they're scary, but don't worry, God's with you. We're gonna take care of business. And so then he begins to tell them, probably orally first or verbally before he writes it, is, hey, there were Nephilim before the flood. in those, just as you read Genesis 6:4, in those days before the flood, and also afterwards, you guys just saw them. But let me tell you where they came from. And he says, the sons of God, these angelic beings, came down and saw human women. It doesn't say, it says the daughters of Adam. So you have now this sons of God group with the daughters of Adam. You're like, well, that's kind of weird. It doesn't say daughters of Cain, because one of the views is, oh, well, these the sons of God are the godly people. They're the sons of Seth, the children of Seth. And then the daughters of that they mated with were the daughters of Cain. They're evil and wicked. You're like, it's not what the text says. The text doesn't say daughters of Cain. It doesn't say sons of Seth. It says sons of God, and it says daughters of mankind. So you have a species elaboration there. And what you have is Moses is giving them in Genesis 6 kind of the real story. He's like, hey, you guys have been in Egypt for a long time. You've heard all these rumors, beings coming down with demigods. I mean, if we look at, like we understand Greek mythology, right? Zeus and the demigods and Hercules. And you have that sort of mythology amongst many cultures. Yeah. So that's why I was saying you have human history with their culture in the Near East, but then you have biblical history starting, let's say, here. Well, when Moses comes along, he goes like, hey, you guys have heard about all these mythologies, demigods, etc., etc. But let me give you the real story. So there is a real legitimate seed of what happened back then, where Satan decided, because of Genesis 3:15, God gives a prophecy, not only Satan, but also in reference to Eve. Hey, Satan, I'm going to make you and the woman at odds with one another, and enmity, Genesis 3:15. Yeah. And Satan, your seed is going to be at odds with her seed, but her seed is you're going to bruise her seed in the heel, but her seed's going to crush your head and destroy you. So you have right there what people talk about as the seed war. And so Satan then later knows, oh man, my destroyer is going to be coming is going to be a descendant of the woman, a human. So he goes to, and then for whatever reason, he goes, and we all of a sudden in Genesis 6, we have this contamination of humanity from these sons of God angels coming down, mating with human women. And then God sends the flood and drowns that whole group out. Well, as we know, when Moses gets there, or at least the people get there, the 12 spies, they see them again, and that's why Moses is trying to give an explanation. So that's kind of the basics. So I don't want to monologue the whole time, so tell me what your thoughts are first, and we can go down some rabbit trails.
Okay, so before me, and Ilo.
Hey, John, good to see you, mate. Yeah, it was very interesting. It was a good interview.
My gain, because my gain was really high on my mic. Does that mic sound better? Can you hear that, Mondo?
I hear it great.
It's really loud in my headset. I don't know, so I just lowered my gain. So now if it's too low, they'll let me know. Okay, so again, my first encounter with the Nephilim was with someone who, and again, I don't really know Alan. Again, I don't know if he's in heaven or hell. I don't know where he went, but I'm just saying that it was very odd. And he kept reading from the book of Enoch, which is not part of the canon of scripture. So that kind of lost me there as well. So, and I know it's in that whole Watchers section, if I'm not mistaken, in Enoch. So when I had spoken to you in Orlando, it was at that point that I said, okay, I'm going to look at some passages of scripture that talk about giants or even the word Nephilim. So that is why when I even emailed you the show notes, Numbers, right? And I'm like, well, Numbers came after Genesis. So my mind was thinking, so I guess this is where I sit with this, right? And this is what I can't wrap my head around. When the flood came, everything in my mind was destroyed. So where did these Nephilim go? So if they are angelic beings, did they just go into the atmosphere?
Or is there a bit of truth to the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Gilgamesh escaped the flood?
Sphere again, where they're all still dwelling today?
Okay, see, this is why conversation is great, because you bring up a very important question. What we have in Genesis 6, I would say Genesis 1 through 11 is a summary of what we would call primeval history. It's not exhaustive. So all of a sudden you have the flood, Noah gets on the boat and he brings animals with him. And then Genesis 6-8, the world is flooded. And it says very clearly that everything's flooded. I mean, the whole world is flooded. It's a global flood. The word kol, K-O-L in Hebrew has the idea of all or every. It appears almost 50 times in just that short little passage. So it's saying everything, all the hills, everything, every being, everything that had breath, all the land animals, everything died. Mm-hmm. So there's two questions really. One is, well, what happened to them, the Nephilim and humanity, and what about the angels? Well, the Nephilim, who had physical bodies, they were hybrid, they were half angelic and half human. They died. They drowned, as with the rest of humanity, and all the land animals and the birds, because they had nowhere to go. The water was on the earth for a long time, So what about the angels? What about these rebels? Well, we have no mention of the consequence there. However, in the New Testament, in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, I think it would be good. We have time. If you can, let's read that.
Absolutely. Okay, so I did, sorry, this is what happens when we're live. So does my sound better? Because I adjusted. Okay, yeah, okay. I got a thumbs up. There we go. Okay, so 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, correct?
Yeah.
All right. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to pits of darkness, held for judgment.
Okay. So in 2 Peter, he is writing about false teachers. That's the context. And we can't go into all of it, but he's saying, hey, everybody, the false teachers are going to get judged. Don't you worry. Don't you fret about it. Don't lose hope. They're going to get judged. Just as, and then he brings up this angelic group, and the context there is the Genesis account. It's very clear because he talks about Noah, he talks about the time frame. So he's clearly talking about the flood generation. And he says, and the angels who sinned, he cast them down to, you read.
John, I noticed you didn't put in the title, Satanic Ritual Abuse Grooming. I noticed you didn't mention that. So would that be a bit of a red flag if I was to do the grooming one and put RSA in it, SRA in it? Would that be a bit of a red flag?
Hell, but the Greek word is Tartarus. It's the only place it appears in the entire New Testament in the Bible, and it refers to like the.
AI, we're glad you found us. We're really glad you found the chat and the family.
Very low place of judgment within the realm of Hades. So Hades is just the place of the underworld in Greek, in New Testament Greek thinking, and Tartarus is like I would say the what's in prison. You have isolation.
Segro.
Like
solitary confinement. Perfect.
Not that I've ever been in prison, but I never just knew that. I don't know. Maybe I should let my secret.
Actually, they don't call it that anymore. They call it segregation because solitary confinement, that's mental health issues. So they call it segregation now. Not that I would know, guys.
Out here, no one decent.
So these angels at the time that sinned, they were put in solitary confinement, and it says very clearly, until the judgment of the great day. And then he goes on in verse 5, he talks about chains, and maybe read verse 5 too.
Okay, well, I don't have my Bible open.
Oh, that's fine.
Because do you have it open in front of you?
Yep.
I have my Bible back there.
No, that's perfectly fine, because I want to read, this is important because you asked the question, well, what happened to these guys? So he says, he says, look at I'll read verse 3 out. Context is always good. He's talking about these false teachers. He says, and in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. Their condemnation from long ago is not idle, and their destruction is not asleep. For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness, to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. And then he goes on, he talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. So he's clearly talking about the flood. Now, let me read one other passage because this is fun. In Jude has one chapter. Jude also is talking about false teachers, and he's writing in a similar way as Peter. But he says this, Jude 6, and the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but they left their proper domain, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgments of the great day. So you're like, okay, now here in this passage, he's talking about two things. It's very specific in the Greek. We won't get into all the details. One is they left their domain. So they left heaven, which is the place where they were allowed to stay, but they also left their place of authority or their place of it's kind of like a realm. That's the way the phraseology appears. You're like, well, what does that mean, Jude? But look at verse 7. There's two connectors here.
And I'm smiling because the light bulb just went off in my head.
Now listen to verse 7. Just as. So he's saying, these angels that sinned, this is how they sinned. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise, now you have another connector, just as likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, they serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. So we know from Genesis 19 that there was a homosexual same-sex situation going on there for this and other reasons. And Jude is saying, hey, those angels that sinned, they sinned in a sexual way by going, some versions will say strange flesh. What that means is something beyond what they're supposed to have. Just like in our natural world, we'll say, hey, God created a male and female. You're not supposed to mix those in that regard. So what you have in 2 Peter 2 is that the angels sinned at the time. In Jude 6, you have these angels sinning sexually, going after things that they shouldn't by leaving their realm and their authoritative domain. And you're like, so most scholars will go, clearly this is a reference to the Genesis 6 because we see it by Peter saying at the time of the flood, you have angels that sinned. Well, if you go back to Genesis 6, it doesn't mention the word angels. It says the sons of God. That's why that phraseology is important, because when you go to the book of Job, you're like, oh, Job 38, verse 6 and 7. The sons of God rejoiced, they clapped when God created the earth, and the morning stars sang together. Well, that was the angelic group. So that's what the Bible says. Now, you mentioned the book of Enoch. Now, we know Enoch is not scripture, but what's interesting is that in the book of Jude, he quotes the book of Enoch, chapter 1, verse 9 of what we know today as the book of Enoch. And so he clearly is reading the book of Enoch. Now, I'm not saying it's scripture. I don't think Jude is saying it's scripture, but he's referencing a work that everybody knows. And if you compare, I did this one time in a class where I was giving a lecture on this. If you think about what Peter says there about chains, darkness, gloom, isolation, you're like, well, Peter, where do you get that? I don't see that in Genesis 6. But if you go to Enoch chapter 6 through 16, it uses the same language. They're in chains. They're down in gloom. They're in darkness for the judgment of the great day. You're like, Peter is reading Enoch, the book of Enoch, because the same language, I mean, it's identical. He's grabbing the language out of the book of Enoch. So is Jude, and he's putting it into holy, inspired scripture. That doesn't authenticate the book of Enoch as being 100% true, but because Peter and Jude are writing this, they're writing by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. As soon as they write it down, those words, that becomes absolutely true. So in the book of Enoch, which again was roughly 300 BC, way before the time of even Jesus, but all the Jews at the time, they found the book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They have found it in other places. It was originally written in Aramaic. There's a whole bunch of textual history there, which we don't need to get into. But what we do know is that Jude and Peter were reading the book of Enoch, and they took the language and incorporated it into scripture to say, hey, guys, don't worry about false teachers. They're going to get their judgment. It's coming, just like those angels did back then. This is what God will judge sin. Now, another interesting nugget is what's the context of Jude and 2 Peter? Well, it's false teaching. Well, you think, well, why would Jude and Peter bring up angels of Genesis 6 in the context of false teaching? That's kind of weird. But the other thing that you can do in First Enoch, chapter 6 through 16, is I did this. Just go through and look at the word teach, or they taught. Well, through those chapters, what you have is these watchers, these sons of God, these angelic beings, a very respectable class, I'll say. They come down, and in the book of Enoch, they're teaching humanity things they're not supposed to. They're teaching them forbidden things, false things, wrong things, which is exactly why Jude and Peter bring up them in their book to say, hey, the false teachers that you guys are seeing right now, they're going to be judged. How do I know? Because God judged the other false teachers that came down at the time of Noah teaching false things. Well, where did they get that from? It's in the book of Enoch. Secondly, the rest of Jude and 2 Peter talk about, which we referenced it a little bit there, is that the false teachers during the first century were known for their lust. They were known for their greed. And it fits right into what we see, again, as exposed in the book of Enoch. Now, let me step back for a moment. Let's put it into some interesting context. So the Bible just says they came down and they took for themselves women of whom they chose, and then they mated with them and produced these Nephilim. Well, it doesn't say rape. Now, I got 3 daughters, they're all in their early 20s. So in that culture, it was a patriarchal culture. The fathers usually arranged for their daughters to be married. And what would happen? Well, hey, my daughters grew up watching Pride and Prejudice. Okay. So I've watched it more times than I can count because, and what do you have there? The mom is interested. Well, if this guy has this much money dowry per year, they're worried about how is my daughter going to be taken care of. So think about it in this context. Think about a very beautiful, I won't use the word beautiful, a very handsome watcher angel who appears as a man, comes down and walks up to a guy out in his field, and he says, hey, I've seen your daughter. She's beautiful. I would like to have her as my wife. Let's make an agreement. And the daughter's over there going, yes, Dad, go for it, man. That guy's hot. He's good looking. I'm in. Okay, so, and what you have at that time as well is mankind is wicked. Genesis 6:5 says they're wicked. They're looking to do wicked things. Now, you have a guy coming along who's very handsome, and he offers you knowledge. Hey, I will give you knowledge that's forbidden, that will help you understand maybe warfare. The book of Enoch tells us. It tells them how to handle astronomy, how to handle the lunar cycle, how to understand herbs and medicines and warfare. And so this watcher angel who now has rebelled against God is going to come down and provide forbidden knowledge. And all you have to do is give him your daughter who's saying, hey, man, that guy's great, handsome, let's make a deal. So sometimes we tend to put our thoughts on it, but I think that this was a mutual arrangement where everybody was happy. And then, of course, they're not, these fallen angels are wicked. They have their own agenda. And we know that in 2 Corinthians 11, that even Satan appears as an angel of light. And so you have them coming along and promising all these things. But we also got to remember that angels, they're not given wives. They're eternal. They don't die. So there's no need for them to have offspring, where mankind, if Adam and Eve or the first 4 people were to die, mankind's over. God would have to start from the beginning. So God has given mankind the ability to reproduce ourselves and to continue the species. Angels don't have that. So you kind of wonder, well, were they jealous of mankind because now they couldn't perpetuate themselves, they couldn't have children? We don't know all the answers to that. The Bible doesn't give us. But the book of Enoch speculates about a lot of this, and it talks about them wanting families for themselves, similar to how mankind was. And that's why they came and did some of these things. But these angels that sinned back then, to bring it back into a conclusion, those angels before the flood that sinned in that way, they were taken and they were cast into Tartarus in chains, I would say, to this very day. But then after the flood, another group of rebels decided to do it again. That's exactly what Genesis 6:4 says. I sent you my article on that, which I got into some of the technical stuff in Hebrew, but it says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Whenever the sons of God came down and mated with human women, it produced them. So whenever you find a Nephilim, it's telling you that if you see a Nephilim, the way that it happened, the manner in which it happened, is because a watcher angel came down and mated with human women. So when you come to Numbers 13:33, and you see them again there in the land, you're like, it happened again, because that's what Genesis 6:4 says.
Can I ask you some questions?
Of course. Yeah, here we go.
Okay. So question number one, and this just went through my head when you were talking about 2 Peter and Jude referring. Now, for everyone who knows, just so you know too, Mondo, I have a jacked up chair. So last Friday's live, I thought the rapture was happening because I felt like something moved, and I was like, and you could see my face. Well, I had to watch it on playback, and I thought I was taken off. No, I wasn't. My chair lowers. So I have fixed it a few times, and it's still not working. So anyway, if I happen to lower, then you know the panic on my face is my chair.
But if you go up,
I'd love to go up. Can
we would love to go up.
That would have been pretty cool, though, when you were in Israel, right? If the rapture.
Oh, yeah, that would have been nice. Shortcut.
Right? Picking up real estate. Okay, so when you were talking 2 Peter and Jude, when it was talking about false teachers, you also had mentioned, I think that's found in 1st or 2nd Corinthians, Satan masquerades, but he also has workers of righteousness.
Yes,
that's not the same context. Or are you saying that?
I think that there's a principle there in 2 Corinthians 11 where when you see somebody appear as angelic or wonderful or handsome, that doesn't automatically mean they have righteous intentions. I think that's the point of 2 Corinthians 11. Paul's saying, hey, as you said in verse 15, even Satan has ministers of righteousness, but at the end of the day, Satan will encourage you to be righteous if he can get your soul. What does he care? If you're righteous now, but he gets your soul, or he gets you to lose your soul, if you want to say it that way, he doesn't care. Promote a little bit of righteousness, big deal.
But that's not the same in the context that's in 2 Peter. So that's not like Carl Lentz is not a Nephilim, right?
No. No.
Stephen Furtick's not? Okay, good. All right. So that was just off on a tangent. So now, okay, when I dove into Genesis 6, because I always have learned to read the Bible slowly, so I can understand. So that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. Let's stop right there. And the sons of God, so that is clearly the fallen angels, correct?
Yeah. So let's stop there.
And I'm writing notes, so when you see me look down, I'm taking notes.
If you look at the whole theological framework of the entire Bible, the sons of God is a group. It's a group of angels. They're not cherubim, they're not seraphim. They're their own group. Within that group, we don't know how many there are, but this is a class of the Bible never calls them angels in the Old Testament. Peter does, but I think he's being generic. In the Old Testament, they're called sons of God. There's a very specific group. Some of that group rebelled. Some of them are still loyal. For example, the sons of God are the watchers. In Daniel chapter 4, you have the only place in the Bible where the word watcher appears. But if you connect the sons of God, they're also called princes in the Old Testament. Daniel chapter 10 is a good example. Michael is a chief prince in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel. In the New Testament, he's called an archangel. So Michael is one of these princes. He's one of these sons of God that are part of this group of a council, the divine council. You have this idea. The watchers in Daniel 4 are giving decrees. So some of this council, not all of them, some of them, we don't know how many there are, they rebelled and went down and took on human women, which there were still the good ones that are there. Michael's one of them, Gabriel probably. So we got to be careful on how we just to be precise.
Okay. So some of this group of the sons of God, they had sex with these beautiful women, and that their offspring were the Nephilim.
Correct.
So the Nephilim in that day were destroyed when the flood happened.
Yep.
Then okay, so my brain's jumping ahead here. So just this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The angels that are bound that we read in 2 Peter, are they the 4 ones during the tribulation that are bound at the river Euphrates, or no?
Good question.
You know, if we don't know for sure, but I would probably say no because they're very specific. But they could because they are bound there. So maybe that's the only connection is the word bound. So they could be.
Because
we
they
just
can
don't
keep
know
in
for
their own
sure.
little prison cell, like
Correct.
underneath, right?
Yep. That's a great connection.
Euphrates is long, so we don't know. So I don't think they're all like in the same.
I think that's a very good possibility. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Mondo said, wow, can I write that down? Let me just write that down. Okay. So they were destroyed. Then now let's move forward to a new account in Numbers. More of the sons of God said, hey, we want to play dirty again.
Mm-hmm.
They played dirty and had more offspring of the Nephilim. But nowhere in scripture, again, was the world destroyed.
Correct.
So those are, see, that creeps me out because we're already in a spiritual realm, right? We all understand that with Ephesians 6. We don't battle flesh and blood. We do battle the spiritual realm. I personally believe that that realm is probably where your telescope reaches, right? I don't know. I've heard there's people who say there's sounds there and it sounds weird or whatever. But is Satan's throne there? I don't know. I mean, I'm not past that realm. Okay. So I guess my question is Shaquille O'Neal a Nephilim? No, I'm teasing. Because the giants, so is Goliath a Nephilim, do you think?
So yeah, let's do a little history because
am I jumping all around? Because this
no,
really, the more you talk, I'm like, okay, I'm connecting the dots biblically.
You're connecting the dots. It's very logical. Let me give another little, which will connect that. You have in especially the first 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, the Torah, however you want to say it, you have several words that appear that are synonymous with Nephilim. In Deuteronomy, if people want to do homework, they can read Genesis 14 and Deuteronomy chapters 2 and 3, as well as Numbers 13. Those 4 passages. Because another phrase that appears that's synonymous in those books is the word Rephaim. The word Rephaim is a reference to giants. But of the Nephilim are like the top. Mm-hmm. But then of the Nephilim, you kind of have the Rephaim is another label. And then below those, you have the Anakim, you have the Emim, you have the Zamzumim, you have all these different tribes, which is what Deuteronomy chapter 2 and 3 describe. But interestingly, God brings Abraham in Genesis 12. He leaves his land and he comes to the land of Israel. So this is just what we have. We're reading the Bible in Genesis 12. And God says, I'm going to give you all this land. Well, then, a few years later, however long it was, in Genesis 14, you have these 5 kings coming down to make war against the kings of Sodom. And it says they came and they defeated the Rephaim, which would be east of the Jordan River in what is modern day Jordan and the Golan Heights. So when we were there, I gave a lecture. I said, hey, guys, we are in the land of Bashan. We were in the land of the Rephaim, the land of the giants. Because everybody knows about Og, King Og. His bedstead was 13 feet, Deuteronomy 2 and 3. That was his whole area, was on the east side. So as early as Genesis 14, the Bible uses the word Rephaim. They're there in the land after God says to Abraham, I'm going to give you this land. Now all of a sudden, the angels come down and they do it again and they fill the land with giants on the east side, the west side. And then, of course, as we know the history, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob and the 12 sons, they go off to Egypt. They're gone for several centuries. And when they come back, the land is full of what?
Giants.
The Nephilim, the Anakim. And you're like, how'd they get here? Well, they started in Genesis 14. And what you have, interestingly, is in Deuteronomy 2 and 3, Moses, he's on Mount Nebo, so he can't go into the land. And he says, hey, guys, we're making our way up around the southeast side, and we're going to go in. But there in the land of Edom, there were the Emim there, the giants, the Rephaim. But God already killed those. Hey, and then when we come up to Moab, the Zamzummim were there, the giants, the Rephaim, but God killed those already. You don't have to worry about those. But I want you to kill all the giants that are in Bashan, like Og. And then when you go across the Jordan River, it says that they encountered the Nephilim that they saw in Numbers 13. They're still there. And then the key passage, can I just read this? This will tie it together.
Absolutely.
Okay. Because, so the war has been going on for a decade. And Joshua, in Joshua chapter 11, this is how he summarizes the war. He says, and Joshua came at that time, and he cut off, this is Joshua 11:21. He came at that time, and he cut off the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, and from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel. Joshua devoted them to destruction with their cities. There was none of the Anakim left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. So what happens is, and this is where it's going to come full circle to your question, he comes into the land, he slaughters all the Nephilim Anakim, but some of them flee to the west, and they end up in what is modern-day Western Israel, known as the Philistine cities, the Pentapolis cities. I did my archaeology in Gath, where Goliath is from. Oh, isn't that interesting that the exact quote in Joshua 11 says that the Anakim fled to Gath, and Goliath was one of the sons of Anak. So you have a complete consistency, and that was 400 years later at the time of David. So those giants fled west. They lived in the land of Philistine, and I actually think they continued to go west, all the way west into Africa, and they fled into the Mediterranean, the Western Mediterranean basin. If you go to Sardinia and other places, there's evidence of megalithic architecture and other things that I think that the giants went that way, which is some of the other archaeological work that we're doing. But so that's the time of Joshua. Let's say you're at 1400 BC to make it easy. David's at the time of 1030 or 1000 BC, make it easy. He's there, and there's a giant. Well, where'd this guy come from? Well, he's one of the sons of Anak, which is what Joshua said. So after David and his mighty men kill all the rest of those giants, they don't appear anymore in the Bible. 1 Samuel 17, really the book of 1 Samuel, you don't see them anymore. So that's kind of the history, at least biblically, of what you have written down of the Nephilim, Rephaim, Anakim, Zamzummim, blah, blah, blah.
It's a lot. So,
It's a lot.
So can I digress for one moment? Because I have the most amazing, listen, when I mean I'm small, Mondo, clearly you can see my subscription count, but I have the most amazing people, and I'm trying not to get emotional. So I didn't comment about the chair, and all of a sudden I see people doing chair fund. So I'm trying not to cry as I'm watching this, because they're just amazing, and I just pray over this podcast. I might be small, but God keeps people. It's just coming in. I mean, this is just,
amen.
I seriously, I'm sorry. And I'm writing stuff down, and I'm trying to listen, and I am listening, but I'm ready to cry. And then I saw a comment. This is just my makeup today. I wanted to be pretty in sparkles and Nephilim attire. So that's why I wore this shirt. Oh my gosh, I can't. I don't handle compliments well. I just don't. But thank you guys from the depths of my being. I'm looking in the camera. Thank you so much. And if I didn't have pretty pink makeup on and glitter, I would be crying. I'll cry when I get off of this.
Okay, guys. See you tomorrow. God bless.